Welcome back to the Cheating Tales Lab. First of all, a huge thank you for helping us reach 5,000 subscribers. Thank you all for your amazing support. To celebrate, we're launching our second channel, Infidelity Tales Lab, where you'll get one-day early access to all our stories plus exclusive, original cheating wife stories you won't find anywhere else. You can subscribe now by clicking the link in the description or the pinned comment, or simply search for Infidelity Tales Lab on YouTube. Don't miss out. Subscribe and listen to exclusive stories. You won't regret subscribing. Now let's begin the story. Ryan Butler's shoes clicked against the pavement as he approached his house, briefcase in hand. The setting sun cast long shadows across the manicured lawn, and a gentle breeze carried the scent of blooming jasmine. After a grueling week-long business trip, all Ryan wanted was to embrace his wife Hannah and relax in the comfort of their home. As he neared the front door, Hannah's voice drifted through an open window. Ryan paused, his hand hovering over the doorknob. Something in her tone made him hesitate. After he inherits her parents' estate, I'll push for a divorce. I just need that money first. He's too stupid to see it coming. The words sliced through the air like a knife, shattering Ryan's world in an instant. He recognized the other voice as Whitney, Hannah's best friend. Blood roared in his ears as his mind raced, connecting dots he'd previously ignored. Late nights at work that left Hannah smelling of unfamiliar cologne. Mysterious text messages that made her smile secretively. Her sudden, pressing interest in his family's finances. It all made sickening sense now. Ryan's jaw clenched, his grip tightening on his briefcase until his knuckles turned white. Years of love and trust crumbled around him, replaced by a cold, burning rage. But as quickly as the anger flared, it was tempered by something else, determination. Taking a deep breath, Ryan forced his features into a mask of normalcy. He wouldn't give Hannah the satisfaction of knowing she blindsided him. No, he'd play her game, and he'd win. With deliberate casualness, Ryan opened the front door. "Honey, I'm home," he called out, his voice betraying none of the turmoil within. Hannah appeared in the hallway, her golden hair perfectly styled and her smile dazzling. To anyone else, she would have looked like the picture of a devoted wife. But now, Ryan saw through the facade to the predator beneath. "Ryan, you're back early," Hannah exclaimed, crossing the room to plant a kiss on his cheek. The gesture, once cherished, now felt like poison against his skin. "Thought I'd surprise you," Ryan replied, forcing a smile. "Is that Whitney I hear?" Hannah's eyes flickered with something. Surprise? Worry? Before her mask slipped back into place. "Yes, she just stopped by for a chat. Whitney, come say hello." As Whitney entered the room, her forced smile didn't quite reach her eyes. Ryan noticed the way she glanced at Hannah, a silent exchange passing between them. "Welcome home, Ryan," Whitney said, her voice overly cheerful. "How was your trip?" "Productive," Ryan answered, studying her carefully. How long had she been complicit in Hannah's deception? "But I'm glad to be back. Nothing beats home, right?" Hannah laughed, a tinkling sound that now grated on Ryan's nerves. "Of course, darling. Why don't you go freshen up? I'll start on dinner." Ryan nodded, heading upstairs to the bedroom. As he set down his briefcase, he could hear Hannah and Whitney's hushed voices from below. No doubt they were scrambling to cover their tracks. That night, as Hannah slept beside him, Ryan lay awake, his mind churning. The woman he'd loved, the life he'd built, it had all been a lie. But two could play at deception. With practiced stealth, Ryan slipped out of bed and retrieved Hannah's phone from her purse. Years of marriage had made him privy to her password, a fact she'd clearly overlooked in her scheming. The screen illuminated, casting an eerie glow in the darkened room. Ryan's fingers moved swiftly, navigating through messages and emails. What he found made his stomach churn. A trove of incriminating messages between Hannah and Bobby Barnard filled the screen. Bobby, the smooth-talking real estate agent Ryan had considered a friend. Their exchanges were filled with passionate declarations, clandestine meeting plans, and worst of all, discussions of their future together, a future built on the ruins of Ryan's life. Ryan's free hand clenched into a fist, his nails digging into his palm. The betrayal cut deep, but he forced himself to keep reading. Each message was a weapon, ammunition for the battle to come. As the first light of dawn crept through the windows, Ryan replaced the phone exactly as he'd found it. He slipped back into bed, his mind racing with plans. Hannah stirred beside him, mumbling in her sleep. Once, he would have pulled her close. Now, her touch made his skin crawl. Ryan closed his eyes, feigning sleep. But inside, a fire had been lit. Hannah and Bobby had declared war, and he intended to emerge victorious. The following day, Ryan stood on his parents' front porch, his knuckles poised to knock. The quaint suburban home looked much as it always had. His mother's prized roses blooming in the front garden, his father's vintage Chevy parked in the driveway. But now, even this familiar setting felt tainted by Hannah's machinations. Taking a steadying breath, Ryan rapped on the door. Moments later, it swung open to reveal his mother, Eleanor Butler. Her face lit up at the sight of him, but Ryan couldn't help noticing the new lines around her eyes, the slight tremor in her hands. "Ryan, what a lovely surprise," Eleanor exclaimed, pulling him into a hug. Come in, come in. Your father will be so pleased to see you." As Ryan followed her into the living room, he took in the subtle signs of his parents' declining health. The new handrails along the walls, the prescribed pill bottles lined up on the kitchen counter. His heart clenched, knowing Hannah had taken advantage of their vulnerability. George Butler sat in his favorite armchair, a thick blanket draped over his legs despite the warm weather. He looked up as Ryan entered, his eyes brightening with recognition. "There's my boy," George said, his voice weaker than Ryan remembered. "To what do we owe this visit?" Ryan plastered on a smile, taking a seat across from his father. "Just thought I'd check in, see how you both are doing. I've been so caught up with work lately, I feel like I've been neglecting you." Eleanor patted his hand. "Nonsense, dear. We know how busy you are. Besides, Hannah's been so helpful lately. She visits often, helps with the groceries, even assisted us with some financial paperwork." Ryan's jaw tightened at the mention of Hannah's name, but he maintained his composure. "Oh, that's thoughtful of her. What kind of paperwork?" George waved a hand dismissively. "Oh, just some updates to the will and such. Hannah mentioned it might be wise to review things, given our health situation. She's been a godsend, really." The pieces clicked into place, and Ryan felt a surge of anger. Hannah had manipulated his parents into changing their will, likely leaving everything to her instead of Ryan. The sheer audacity of her betrayal left him momentarily speechless. Swallowing hard, Ryan leaned forward. "Dad, Mom, I think it might be a good idea for us to visit your lawyer together, just to make sure everything's in order." Eleanor looked concerned. "Is something wrong, dear?" Ryan shook his head, forcing a reassuring smile. "Not at all. I just want to make sure all your affairs are in order, given your health concerns. It would give me peace of mind." After a moment's hesitation, George nodded. "That's probably wise, son. We can go tomorrow if you're free." "Perfect," Ryan said, already formulating his plan. "I'll pick you up in the morning." The next day, Ryan sat beside his parents in the austere office of Jerome Hawkins, the family's longtime lawyer. The elderly attorney peered at them over his wire-rimmed glasses, a look of concern etched on his face. "Now, Mr. and Mrs. Butler," Hawkins began, "I understand you wish to review the changes made to your will last month?" George nodded. "Yes, that's right. Our daughter-in-law, Hannah, suggested some updates." Ryan leaned forward. "Mr. Hawkins, could you please outline those changes for us?" As the lawyer detailed the alterations, Ryan watched the color drain from his parents' faces. The entire estate, the house, savings, even his father's beloved Chevy, had been left to Hannah, with Ryan receiving only a token sum. "But that can't be right," Eleanor stammered, looking at George in confusion. "We would never cut Ryan out like that." Ryan gently took his mother's hand. "It's okay, Mom. I think Hannah might have misrepresented some things when she helped you with this." George's face hardened, a glimpse of his former strength shining through. "Hawkins, I want these changes reversed immediately. Everything goes back to Ryan, as we originally intended." As the lawyer busied himself with the paperwork, he shot Ryan a knowing look. "Mr. Butler, Ryan, may I have a word in private?" Once they were alone, Hawkins leaned in close. I've known your family for years, son. Something doesn't smell right about all this. You do well to protect yourself. Ryan nodded grimly. I intend to, Mr. Hawkins. I intend to. The offices of Blackstone Investigations stood in stark contrast to Ryan's usual haunts, where his world was one of sleek modernity and architectural precision. This place exuded an air of gritty determination. The faded lettering on the frosted glass door read, Maxwell King, Private Investigator. Ryan straightened his tie before knocking. A gruff voice called out, Enter. Inside, he found a man who looked like he'd stepped out of a noir film. Maxwell King was all sharp angles and shrewd eyes, his desk cluttered with files and a half-empty bottle of whiskey. Mr. Butler, King said, gesturing to a chair. What can I do for you? Ryan sat, his posture rigid. I need evidence of my wife's infidelity. Photos, recordings, anything that'll hold up in court. King's eyebrow arched. Divorce case, eh? Nasty business. You have no idea, Ryan muttered. He slid a folder across the desk. This is everything I know about her affair. Locations, times, the other man's information. I need concrete proof, and I need it fast. The investigator leafed through the documents, letting out a low whistle. Your wife's not just cheating. This looks like a full-blown conspiracy. Ryan's jaw clenched. Exactly. That's why I need the best. Money is no object. A slow smile spread across King's face. Well then, Mr. Butler, let's get to work. As Ryan left the office, his phone buzzed. A message from his project manager. Client meeting in 30. Harcourt account. Crucial. Ryan cursed under his breath. With everything happening in his personal life, he'd almost forgotten about the Harcourt project, a multi-million-dollar development that could make or break his career. Pushing thoughts of Hannah aside, Ryan threw himself into work. The following weeks became a delicate balancing act. By day, he was the consummate professional, wowing clients with innovative designs and attention to detail. By night, he meticulously built his case against Hannah. The Harcourt project consumed his days. Ryan poured every ounce of his creativity and expertise into the designs, impressing the clients with his dedication. In client meetings, he was focused and charismatic, never letting on that his personal life was in shambles. I've never seen work like this, Mr. Harcourt said during one presentation, his eyes wide as he examined the 3D renderings. It's like you've read my mind, Butler. Ryan allowed himself a small smile. I believe in fully understanding my client's visions, Mr. Harcourt. This project isn't just a job for me. It's a passion. As he drove home that evening, Ryan felt a flicker of his old confidence. He may have been blindsided in his personal life, but professionally, he was still at the top of his game. The moment he walked through the front door, however, reality came crashing back. Hannah was waiting for him, a concerned look plastered on her face. Darling, you've been working so hard lately, she cooed, running a hand down his arm. I've barely seen you. Is everything all right? Ryan forced himself to lean into her touch, suppressing a shudder. Just a big project, that's all. Nothing to worry about. Hannah's eyes narrowed almost imperceptibly. Well, I think you need a break. I've arranged a dinner tomorrow night with Bobby and Whitney. A nice, friendly gathering to help you unwind. For a moment, Ryan marveled at her audacity. Dinner with her lover and accomplice? But he quickly schooled his features into a grateful smile. That sounds wonderful, honey. Thank you for thinking of me. As Hannah turned away, satisfied, Ryan allowed himself a grim smile. Little did she know, she just handed him the perfect opportunity. The next evening, Ryan found himself seated across from Bobby Barnard at an upscale restaurant. The real estate agent was every bit as smooth in person as he was in Hannah's messages, all white teeth and practiced charm. Ryan, my man, Bobby exclaimed, clapping him on the shoulder. It's been too long. How's work treating you? Ryan plastered on a smile, acutely aware of the recording device hidden in his jacket pocket. Can't complain. How about you, Bobby? Any exciting deals in the works? Bobby's eyes lit up, his ego clearly unable to resist the bait. Oh, you know me. Always got something cooking. In fact, I've got some insider knowledge on a few prime properties coming to market soon. As Bobby launched into a detailed account of his allegedly exclusive real estate leads, Ryan noticed Hannah shooting warning glances at her lover. But Bobby, caught up in his own perceived brilliance, failed to notice. Whitney, for her part, seemed increasingly uncomfortable as the evening wore on. She laughed too loudly at Bobby's jokes and kept glancing nervously between Hannah and Ryan. As the meal progressed, Ryan played his role to perfection, the oblivious, trusting husband. He laughed at Bobby's jokes, complimented Hannah's choice of restaurant, and skillfully steered the conversation towards topics that would incriminate the adulterous couple. By the time dessert arrived, Ryan had a wealth of recorded evidence, from Bobby's boasts about insider trading to Hannah's thinly veiled references to their affair. As he raised his glass in a toast, Ryan allowed himself to feel a glimmer of satisfaction. The game was far from over, but he'd just scored a major victory. Hannah and Bobby thought they were playing chess, but they'd find out soon enough that Ryan was several moves ahead. The sleek office of Jake Mason, renowned divorce attorney, exuded an air of calculated ruthlessness. Ryan Butler sat across from Mason, his posture rigid and eyes sharp. The lawyer's reputation for leaving spouses penniless preceded him, and that's exactly what Ryan needed. Mason leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled. "So, Mr. Butler, you want to leave your wife with nothing? I can arrange that, but I need to know everything." Ryan nodded, his voice steady. "Hannah's been planning this for years. She manipulated my parents, tried to steal my inheritance, and she's having an affair with Bobby Barnard, the real estate agent." Mason's eyebrow arched. "Interesting. What evidence do you have?" Ryan produced a flash drive. "Recordings, text messages, financial records. But there's more. I've discovered Hannah's been siphoning money from our joint accounts." Mason's eyes glinted with interest. "Now we're talking. How much?" "Thousands, possibly more. I need your help to track it all down." The lawyer nodded, a predatory smile spreading across his face. "Leave it to me, Mr. Butler. We'll make sure Hannah regrets the day she crossed you." Over the next few weeks, Ryan and Mason meticulously built their case. Using his connections, Ryan traced the money trail, uncovering a web of deceit that ran deeper than he'd imagined. One evening, as Ryan pored over financial documents in his home office, a name caught his eye. Butler and Barnard Architects. His blood ran cold as he realized the full extent of Hannah and Bobby's betrayal. They weren't just planning to take his money. They were going to steal his entire career. The documents detailed plans for a rival architecture firm, using Ryan's stolen designs and client list. Ryan's hands clenched, crumpling the paper. The audacity of their scheme fueled his resolve. He would not only protect himself but destroy their plans entirely. At home, Ryan maintained a facade of normalcy. He smiled at Hannah, engaged in small talk, all while his mind cataloged every interaction. Hidden cameras, installed discreetly throughout the house, captured Hannah's clandestine meetings with Bobby. Hannah sauntered into the kitchen one evening, her smile sickly sweet. "Darling, I was thinking we should redecorate the living room. What do you think?" Ryan looked up from his laptop, his face a mask of casual interest. "Sounds great, honey. Whatever you think is best." As Hannah launched into her ideas, Ryan nodded along, all while the camera hidden in the vase on the counter recorded her every word. Later, he would review the footage, noting any slips or inconsistencies in her behavior. The Butler family home, once a sanctuary of warmth and love, now felt like a battlefield to Ryan. As he approached the front door, steeling himself for the confrontation ahead, he couldn't help but feel a pang of sadness for what had been lost. Kimberly, his younger sister, opened the door. Her usual warm smile was replaced by a cool, almost hostile expression. "Ryan, what are you doing here?" Ryan stepped inside, his voice level. "We need to talk, Kim. It's important." In the living room, tension crackled in the air. Kimberly stood with her arms crossed, defiance written across her face. "If you're here to make excuses for how you've been treating Hannah, save it. She's told me everything." Ryan's jaw clenched, but he kept his composure. "Has she? And what exactly has she told you?" "That you're neglectful, cruel even. That you're trying to cut her out of the family inheritance." "How could you, Ryan?" After everything she's done for Mom and Dad. For a moment, Ryan marveled at Hannah's ability to spin such elaborate lies. Then, without a word, he placed a folder on the coffee table between them. "What's this?" Kimberly asked, suspicion lacing her voice. "The truth," Ryan replied simply. "Everything Hannah's been hiding. Her affair with Bobby, her attempts to manipulate our parents, the money she's been stealing. It's all there." Kimberly's hand trembled as she reached for the folder. As she read, her face paled, eyes widening in shock and disbelief. This can't be true," she whispered. "I'm afraid it is, Kim. Hannah's been playing us all." Tears welled in Kimberly's eyes as the full weight of the deception hit her. "Oh God, Ryan. I'm so sorry. I had no idea. I've been helping her, telling her about the family finances, about your work schedule. I thought I was helping you both." Ryan moved to sit beside his sister, placing a comforting hand on her shoulder. "It's not your fault, Kim. Hannah fooled all of us. But now, I need your help to make this right." Kimberly looked up, determination replacing the shock in her eyes. "Anything. What do you need me to do?" As Ryan outlined his plan, Kimberly listened intently, her loyalty to her brother fully restored. Together, they would gather more evidence, strengthening the case against Hannah and Bobby. Meanwhile, at work, Ryan faced a new challenge. Client meetings were mysteriously canceled, crucial documents went missing, and rumors began to circulate about his reliability. Ryan sat in his office, frustration mounting as he received yet another email about a postponed meeting. The pieces clicked into place. This had Bobby written all over it. Determination set in. Ryan wouldn't let these petty sabotage attempts derail him. He reached for his phone, dialing a client whose meeting had been canceled. "Mr. Harcourt? Ryan Butler here. I wanted to personally apologize for any confusion regarding our meeting." "What's that? You never canceled?" "I see. Well, I'm glad I called. How about we meet for dinner tonight to discuss the project?" One by one, Ryan reached out to his clients, smoothing over misunderstandings and reaffirming his commitment to their projects. He worked late into the night, recreating lost documents and refining designs. Each attempt to undermine him only strengthened Ryan's resolve. He would not only survive this challenge but emerge stronger, leaving Hannah and Bobby's schemes in ruins. The real estate office was quiet as Ryan signed the final papers. The sale of their house, his house now, was complete. The funds safely transferred to a secure account Hannah couldn't touch. The realtor, a colleague of Bobby's, looked uncomfortable, clearly aware of the situation but bound by professional discretion. "Congratulations, Mr. Butler," she said, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. "Is there anything else you need?" Ryan stood, his face impassive. "No, thank you. I think that covers everything." As he left the office, Ryan felt a weight lift from his shoulders. Another piece of the puzzle was in place. He pulled out his phone, dialing his bank. "This is Ryan Butler. I need to close all joint accounts immediately." "Yes, I understand the implications. Please proceed." Back at the house, Hannah was waiting, a look of forced concern on her face. "Ryan, darling, we need to talk. You've been so distant lately. I'm worried about you." Ryan steeled himself, plastering on a weary smile. "I'm sorry, Hannah. Work's been stressful. Maybe you're right, we should talk." Hannah's eyes lit up, a predatory gleam that Ryan now recognized all too well. "I've been thinking. We both need a break. How about a romantic getaway? Just the two of us?" For a moment, Ryan marveled at her audacity. Even now, she was trying to manipulate him, to delay the inevitable. But two could play at that game. "That sounds wonderful, honey. Where did you have in mind?" As Hannah launched into her plans for their trip, Ryan nodded along, all while mentally preparing for the final act of this charade. Little did Hannah know, this romantic getaway would be the last nail in the coffin of their marriage. The resort was picturesque, all crystal-clear waters and pristine beaches. Hannah played the role of the doting wife to perfection, hanging on Ryan's every word, arranging romantic dinners, and showering him with affection. Ryan reciprocated, forcing himself to smile, to touch her, all while silently counting down the hours. He knew the truth. This was Hannah's last-ditch effort to secure her claim on his inheritance. On their third night, As they sat on their private balcony watching the sunset, Ryan's phone buzzed. The message he'd been dreading and expecting in equal measure had arrived. Ryan's face paled as he read the text, his hands shaking slightly. Hannah, ever the opportunist, pounced. Ryan? What's wrong? Has something happened? He looked up, meeting her eyes. It's my parents. They're gone. Passed away in their sleep last night. For a split second, Hannah's mask slipped. A flash of triumph, quickly replaced by a poor facsimile of grief. Oh, Ryan. I'm so sorry. How awful. As she moved to embrace him, Ryan caught the gleam in her eyes. There was no sadness there, no compassion, only barely concealed greed. In that moment, any lingering doubt Ryan might have harbored evaporated. Hannah had never loved him. He was nothing but a means to an end, a path to wealth and status. Ryan allowed himself to be held, his mind racing. The endgame was approaching. Soon, very soon, Hannah would learn the true cost of her betrayal. As they packed to return home, ostensibly to plan the funeral, Ryan watched Hannah flit about the room. She was practically vibrating with poorly concealed excitement, no doubt already planning how to spend her ill-gotten gains. We should call the lawyer as soon as we get back, Hannah said, her voice dripping with false concern. Make sure everything's in order with the will. You shouldn't have to worry about such things at a time like this. Ryan nodded, his face a mask of grief. You're right. Thank you for thinking of everything, Hannah. I don't know what I'd do without you. The irony of his words was not lost on Ryan. Indeed, Hannah would soon learn exactly what life without him would be like. And it would be nothing like she'd planned. The Butler residence stood silent as Ryan pulled into the driveway. The facade of the house, once a symbol of his shared life with Hannah, now seemed like a hollow shell. He stepped out of the car, briefcase in hand, his face a mask of grim determination. Inside, Hannah bustled about, her voice carrying from the kitchen. Ryan, is that you? I've been thinking about the funeral arrangements. We should probably. Her words cut off abruptly as Ryan entered the room. He stood in the doorway, his posture rigid, eyes cold. In his hand, he held a thick envelope. Hannah's brow furrowed. What's that? Without a word, Ryan placed the envelope on the kitchen counter and slid it towards her. Hannah's manicured fingers trembled slightly as she opened it, her eyes widening as she scanned the contents. Divorce papers? Her voice rose, incredulous. What is this, Ryan? Some kind of sick joke? Ryan's voice was steady, devoid of emotion. No joke, Hannah. I know everything. The color drained from Hannah's face, quickly replaced by a flush of anger. Everything? What are you talking about? The affair with Bobby. The manipulation of my parents. Your plans to steal my inheritance, my clients, my entire career. Ryan's words were measured, each one landing like a blow. Did you really think I wouldn't find out? Hannah's shock quickly morphed into rage. She lunged forward, her perfectly manicured nails clawing at the air between them. You can't do this to me. After everything I've done for you, for this family. Ryan stood his ground, unflinching in the face of her fury. Everything you've done? You mean lie, cheat, and steal? Hannah's tactics shifted, her voice taking on a pleading tone. Ryan, please. You don't understand. I love you. We can work this out. But Ryan remained unmoved, his resolve unshakable. Save it, Hannah. Your act might have worked before, but not anymore. It's over. Realizing the gravity of her situation, Hannah's demeanor changed once again. Her eyes narrowed, voice dropping to a menacing hiss. You'll regret this, Ryan. I'll ruin you. By the time I'm done, you'll have nothing left. Ryan met her gaze, a hint of a smile playing at the corners of his mouth. I don't think so, Hannah. You see, I've been preparing for this moment for quite some time. Every lie, every manipulation, every secret meeting with Bobby. I have it all documented. Hannah's face paled. She stumbled backward, groping for her phone on the counter. Her fingers shook as she dialed, her voice frantic when the call connected. Bobby? Bobby, you need to come over right now. Ryan knows. He knows everything. Minutes later, the sound of screeching tires announced Bobby's arrival. He burst through the front door, his usual smooth demeanor replaced by barely contained panic. "What's going on?" Bobby demanded, looking between Hannah and Ryan. "What does he know?" Ryan calmly retrieved a small device from his pocket. With the press of a button, Bobby's own voice filled the room. "Once we get control of Ryan's firm, we'll have access to all his clients. Between that and Hannah's inheritance, we'll be set for life. That idiot won't know what hit him." Bobby's arrogance crumbled, replaced by fear. He looked at Hannah, then back at Ryan, his mouth opening and closing wordlessly. Ryan's voice was cold. "I suggest you both talk to your lawyers. You're going to need them." As Hannah and Bobby stood shell-shocked, Ryan gathered his things. At the door, he paused, looking back at the two people who had betrayed him so deeply. "I'll be staying elsewhere until the divorce is finalized. I suggest you do the same, Hannah. This house no longer belongs to either of us." With that, Ryan walked out, leaving Hannah and Bobby to face the wreckage of their failed scheme. The courthouse buzzed with activity as Ryan strode through the main entrance. His lawyer, Jake Mason, fell into step beside him, briefcase swinging. "Ready for this?" Mason asked, his eyes gleaming with anticipation. Ryan nodded, his jaw set. "More than ready. Let's end this." Inside the courtroom, Hannah and Bobby sat with their legal team, both looking significantly less polished than usual. Hannah's designer outfit couldn't hide the dark circles under her eyes, while Bobby's usual confident smirk was nowhere to be seen. As the proceedings began, Hannah and Bobby's lawyers attempted to paint Ryan as the villain. They spun tales of neglect and emotional abuse, portraying Hannah as a devoted wife driven to desperation by her husband's cruelty. But Ryan and Mason were prepared. With meticulous precision, they dismantled each lie, presenting irrefutable evidence of Hannah and Bobby's deceit. Mason called their first witness, Kimberly, Ryan's sister. As she took the stand, Hannah's face paled. Kimberly's voice was steady as she recounted Hannah's manipulation. "She told me Ryan was cruel, that he was trying to cut her out of the family. I believed her. I even helped her, telling her about our family finances. But it was all a lie." Hannah's lawyer attempted to discredit Kimberly, but her testimony stood firm. Next came a surprise witness, Whitney, Hannah's former best friend. Whitney avoided Hannah's accusatory glare as she spoke. "I can't keep quiet anymore. Hannah and Bobby have been planning this for years. They were going to take everything from Ryan. His money, his business, everything." As witness after witness corroborated Ryan's claims, Hannah and Bobby's united front began to crumble. They exchanged accusatory glances, each clearly considering how to save themselves at the other's expense. The final blow came when Mason presented financial records showing how Hannah had siphoned money from joint accounts, along with detailed plans for the rival architecture firm she and Bobby had intended to start using Ryan's stolen designs. Hannah's composure finally broke. She stood up, pointing at Bobby. "It was his idea. He convinced me to do it. I never wanted to hurt Ryan." Bobby, his face red with anger, shouted back, "Don't try to pin this on me. You were the one who came up with the plan to manipulate his parents." The judge called for order as Hannah and Bobby continued to hurl accusations at each other, their relationship disintegrating in front of the entire courtroom. Through it all, Ryan sat calmly, his face impassive. He had known this moment would come, when the true nature of Hannah and Bobby's relationship would be revealed. As the day's proceedings came to a close, the judge's words hung in the air. "In light of the overwhelming evidence presented, I have no choice but to rule in favor of Mr. Butler. The divorce is granted, with all assets to be divided as per the prenuptial agreement." Hannah's anguished cry echoed through the courtroom, but Ryan didn't flinch. He stood, buttoned his jacket, and walked out, leaving the chaos behind him. The judge's chambers were silent as Ryan sat across from his lawyer, Mason. The final paperwork lay on the desk between them, waiting for signatures. "Congratulations, Mr. Butler," the judge said, sliding the documents towards Ryan. "With my ruling, your divorce is finalized. As per the terms we've discussed, Mrs. Butler, or should I say, Ms. Reeves now, will receive no alimony or share of your assets due to her infidelity and financial misconduct." Ryan nodded, his pen hovering over the signature line. "And what about the business? My designs? The judge smiled. The court has granted a permanent injunction against Ms. Reeves and Mr. Barnard. They are prohibited from using any of your designs or client information. Furthermore, Mr. Barnard is facing separate charges for his role in the financial fraud. With a steady hand, Ryan signed the papers. As he did, he felt a weight lift from his shoulders. It was done. Outside the courthouse, reporters clamored for a statement. Ryan stood at the top of the steps, Mason by his side. "Mr. Butler, how do you feel about the verdict?" Ryan's voice was calm and measured. "Justice has been served. That's all I have to say on the matter." As he made his way through the crowd, Ryan caught sight of Hannah being ushered into a waiting car. Their eyes met for a brief moment. In hers, he saw a mixture of anger, desperation, and something else, perhaps the realization of what she had lost. Ryan turned away, focusing on the road ahead. He had a new life to build. Weeks later, Ryan stood in his new office, boxes still unpacked around him. The view from the window showcased a different city skyline, a fresh start. His phone buzzed with a message from Kimberly. "How's the new job? We miss you already." Ryan smiled as he typed his reply. "It's a challenge, but that's exactly what I needed." "Miss you too, sis." As he set the phone down, Ryan's eyes fell on a framed photo on his desk. It showed him with his parents, taken just months before their passing. He picked it up, his thumb tracing their smiling faces. "I did it," he whispered. "I made things right." A knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. His new assistant poked her head in. "Mr. Butler, your 2 o'clock is here." Ryan set down the photo, straightened his tie, and stood. "Thank you, Sarah. Send them in." As he prepared to greet his new clients, Ryan felt a sense of purpose wash over him. The past was behind him, and the future, with all its possibilities, lay ahead. Epilogue. 3 years passed, each day taking Ryan further from the pain and betrayal of his past. His new firm had flourished, quickly gaining a reputation for innovative designs and uncompromising integrity. Ryan found himself respected in his field, his name mentioned in the same breath as architecture's brightest stars. On a rainy evening, Ryan sat in his penthouse apartment, going over plans for his latest project. The soft patter of raindrops against the windows provided a soothing backdrop to his work. A sudden knock at the door startled him from his concentration. Frowning, Ryan checked his watch. It was past 9 p.m., far too late for any expected visitors. As he opened the door, the sight before him made him freeze. Hannah stood in the hallway, a far cry from the polished, confident woman she'd once been. Her clothes were worn, her once perfect hair now lank and unkempt. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, which looked up at Ryan with a mixture of desperation and hope. "Ryan," she breathed, her voice cracking. I need to talk to you." For a moment, Ryan said nothing, simply taking in the sight of his ex-wife. Then, wordlessly, he stepped aside, allowing her to enter. Hannah stumbled into the apartment, her eyes darting around, taking in the evidence of Ryan's success. When she turned to face him, her face crumpled. "I'm so sorry, Ryan," she sobbed. "I was wrong. So terribly wrong. I've lost everything, my job, my friends. Bobby's in jail. I have nothing left." She stepped towards him, hands outstretched pleadingly. "I know I don't deserve it, but please, can you find it in your heart to forgive me? To give me another chance?" Ryan listened silently, his face impassive. He could see the Hannah he'd once loved in this broken woman before him, but he also remembered the calculating manipulator she'd revealed herself to be. When Hannah finished, tears streaming down her face, Ryan finally spoke. His voice was calm, devoid of anger, but also of warmth. "Goodbye, Hannah." With that, he opened the door, gesturing for her to leave. Hannah's face crumpled anew as she realized the finality of his words. She shuffled past him, pausing in the hallway to look back one last time. But Ryan had already closed the door. As Hannah's sobs faded down the hallway, Ryan turned back to his apartment. He walked to the window, looking out at the rain-soaked city below. A small smile played on his lips, not one of joy at Hannah's suffering, but of satisfaction. Justice, in its own way, had been served. The wheel had turned, and those who had sought to destroy him had ultimately destroyed themselves. Ryan returned to his desk, to the plans that represented his future. He had built a new life from the ashes of betrayal, and he wouldn't let the ghosts of his past haunt him any longer. As he immersed himself in his work, Ryan felt a sense of peace wash over him. He had survived, he had thrived, and now, finally, he was free.
This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comment section. Thanks for your time. If you enjoy the story, please subscribe to this channel. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.
My ex and I have a young teen daughter, Nicole. Nicole has several medical conditions that require a lot of attention. She'll need some in-home assistance for the rest of her life. While we have an aide to help a couple of days a week, it's still challenging. The outcome of Nicole's condition became apparent when she was a toddler. At that point, my ex and I agreed we wouldn't have more kids because it wouldn't be fair to anyone. There'd be no way that we could focus the attention on 2 kids. Someone would lose out in the situation. We divorced when Nicole was 5. We originally had 50-50 custody. 3 years later, my ex remarried. His new wife, Callie, is nice. My ex did say that she didn't understand the severity of Nicole's condition. I figured there was a learning curve. Eventually, Callie basically said she wanted to be hands-off, which I respected, though I wondered how that'd work, considering Nicole lives with them half the time. Last year, my ex and Callie had a baby. I was a little surprised, given that my ex was always firm on not having more kids, but I figured it wasn't my business. He began complaining that juggling Nicole and the baby was a lot of work. I sympathized, but didn't know what else to say. Recently, the venting got worse. He said Callie yelled at him for taking Nicole to her physical therapy appointment instead of helping her with the baby. He brought up potentially having Nicole stay with me more. I wasn't entirely shocked, but it pissed me off. I said Nicole was his daughter. He can't just abandon that responsibility. He asked what he was supposed to do about the baby. I said, maybe you should have thought of that before you procreated. I mean, we discussed this 10 years ago as to why it'd be hard to juggle 2 kids. Why did you think having another would be a good idea? He got quiet and said that Callie wanted a baby. I said that wasn't enough of a reason, and maybe he should have thought harder before bringing more life into this world. The conversation ended with me saying I'd call my lawyer and we could arrange for him to have less custody, as I'd rather my daughter be adequately cared for than to be viewed as a burden. Callie called me that night, very upset that I'd made my ex cry and that I said her baby shouldn't exist. I told her that's not what I said completely, more that they didn't think it through. She called me a jerk. Am I the idiot? Not the idiot. I assume Callie had a dream of Nicole magically disappearing to your place so she and her ex can have their happy new trio. You are correct to hold him accountable, especially if Nicole has the mental capacity to know she's being shut out. Yeah, it feels like a long con to use the baby as an excuse to push Nicole out. It seems like it's working too, which is sad. I hope OP has a good lawyer who can make sure her ex pays as much as he can afford for respite care. What? Nothing left to cover a sitter for date night with Callie? Too bad, so sad. OP, your ex found out. Make sure any support is adjusted as well. If he puts in less effort, he must pay to compensate and push for the maximum possible. Sadly, this is not how it works. The way OP plays it, this will end with OP having full custody. She's sending her lawyer to court for more custody, and OP's ex ends up paying slightly bigger child support and doing nothing more. If OP had more sense, she will block the new wife's number and discuss responsibilities with the child's parent. And if she had any sense, she'll forego the emotional responses. These will not help the kid. That'll only help her ex get out without feeling guilty because OP's taking the kid from him and stealing his chance to have a relationship with his kid. The reasonable reaction would have been, yeah, it's hard for all of us. Please vent to someone else. Agreed. OP, you are the idiot. Functionally, your ex asked you to take your daughter for more time because he has a new baby and it's stressful. That's it. That's the whole thing. The rest is a melange of everyone's emotions surrounding this transition. Y'all have been divorced for years. Your ex is absolutely entitled to have another child with his wife. He needed help, but he wasn't angry. He just seems overwhelmed in your telling of events. For the time being, he just needs you to take y'all daughter more until the baby isn't a baby. Please don't alienate your daughter, because that's what Callie wants. My husband and I met in college. Before that, he dated Millie from ages 14 to 17. When I first met his family, they all seemed to be in awe of me, and it was quite awkward. So he explained that his family and most people in his life before college believed that he and Millie would be together forever. I was uncomfortable, but he assured me he loves me and only me. We had a few fights over things his friend said, but ultimately it was clear that we were being dumb. I didn't have any problems related to Millie for several years. Everyone seemed to have moved on. My husband and I now have 3 kids. My middle son, a young grammar schooler, is in the same grade as Millie's son. They're in different classes, and I only learned about this after my mother-in-law passively mentioned it. The moms in my son's class created a group chat. A couple of days ago, Millie contacted me and asked if I could add her to this group chat. She said she and her son are having trouble connecting with the other moms and kids, which would be a huge help. I was a bit confused as to why she was asking me for permission and how she got my number, but I quickly realized that the other moms probably told her, and out of consideration for me, wanted her to ask me. I'm not sure. Most of the women grew up with Millie, so they know everything. I told her I couldn't stop anyone if they wanted to add her, but I'd rather she not join. Besides, it's a class group chat, and her son isn't in it. She got upset and asked if I was only saying no because of her history with my husband. I said, well, yeah. She then said that I'm being sensitive and petty. I told her that I was uncomfortable. She said not everything is about me, and I'm being selfish. I made a sarcastic comment about protecting my peace before firmly telling her she wouldn't change my mind and that neither she nor her son was my responsibility. Millie got even angrier and said that I was the only person still hung up over their relationship and that I needed to grow up and stop being so insecure. She also accused me of being elitist. She's still at it and will tell anyone who'll listen about how I'm being selfish and how I'm so hung up over the past. My husband thinks we're all being ridiculous. He was joking when he said that, but I don't know. One of the moms in the group chat privately asked me about the whole thing, and she just said, So I don't know, but they said they weren't going to add her unless I gave my permission. Am I the idiot? You are the idiot. So to be clear, you're not going to add another married woman with a son who needs help, who reached out to you to be respectful, to a group chat because she dated your husband in high school? Why? Are you still in high school? This isn't elitism. This is pettiness at its finest. It's a class group chat, and her kid isn't in the class. And OP should have said that and stood on principle. I would never give another woman the satisfaction she gave Millie, and I'd eat a shoe before my grown butt admitted I was insecure about someone else's 3-year high school relationship. This is wild. Everyone's the idiot here. In my opinion, OP is insecure and jealous, but she's totally in the right. The group chat is for parents of students in the same class, presumably so they can coordinate carpooling, lost and found class parties, and that sort of thing. None of this will apply to Millie. She needs to talk to the parents whose kids are in the same class as her child. It's weird and intrusive that Millie's pressuring OP for permission to join. I'd be weirded out too if my spouse's ex wanted inside information on our child's school activities. You are the idiot, not for not accepting her in the group chat, but for making a huge deal of her presence. It's kind of baffling that you would give so much importance to your husband's ex. I would understand if the breakup was new, but you're married to this man and have children with him. He's moved on a long time ago, but you never did. Why does this woman still make you uncomfortable? Grow up, so you know they have a group chat without you, talking about how insane you are, right? I'm sure Millie is in that one. My husband, 45, and I, 25, have been together for 4 years. I thought he would be my last. We have 2 kids together, with another on the way. For a bit of a backstory on why I went through his phone. In our first year together, he started getting conservative over his phone. My cousin's husband caught him flirting with the cashier while I was pregnant with our first. This caused a lot of trust issues, and as the years went by, I was no longer allowed to touch his phone in any way. I have caught him talking with many other women on Facebook, but he always makes sure to delete conversations, so what I would read wasn't anything inappropriate until I checked out his Google Chats, as it was in an app that he had previously downloaded. Luckily, phone saved login info, and I got in. He told other women that he loved them, sent them pictures, and told them how much he wanted to meet them. He attempted to meet with many of these women, but I never saw where they agreed to meet, so I'm not sure if he's fully done the deed. I'm 25 weeks pregnant right now, and my hormones are going crazy. It's hard to keep from fighting, but I feel as if I've been crushed. He's upset that I keep bringing these issues up, but how do you just get over it when it's only been 3 days since I found everything, and I'm still finding more? It's all in the uninstalled apps. I want to leave him, but my oldest kid from a previous relationship, who's a young grammar schooler, calls him dad, and the kids would have a hard time adjusting. I feel like our family's been destroyed, and I really don't know what to do. He keeps telling me he didn't cheat because he never met any of them, but I still feel like what he was doing was cheating. Not the idiot. Are you serious, girl? He's emotionally cheating, sending pics, and making plans to meet up with other women while you're pregnant with his child? And he has the nerve to say he didn't cheat because he didn't meet them? That's a load of crap. He's betraying your trust and disrespecting your relationship. Don't let him gaslight you into thinking it's not a big deal. Your well-being and the well-being of your kids should come first. Get out of there and find someone who deserves you. I stopped reading at the I'm 25 and have our 3rd kid on the way with the 45-year-old. Lady, what on God's green earth are you doing with this man? You were 21 when you started dating a 41-year-old? 3 kids in 4 years? And you already have a young grammar schooler? This dude has been treating you like crap pretty much your entire relationship. He's keeping you knocked up and dependent so he can have his cake and eat it too. You've pretty much been pregnant or postpartum your entire relationship. I cut her some slack, as he most likely used his wealth, knowledge, and power to manipulate her. But still, darling, take a breath and read this story to yourself as if reading it for the first time. This is insane. Yes, he's cheating. What are you doing with him? No matter what you do, his behavior will not change. Ultimately, the kids will be fine. Make some sensible plans and get rid of him. Yes, the kids will have some difficulty adjusting, but do you want to raise them with him as their role model and you as their model of accepting it? I know it's hard, but please leave him. This has been a built-up issue. My son got married this weekend, and this issue isn't dying, so I'm going here. My daughter has very bad anxiety. She's 19, and I'll call her Shelly. Shelly used to go to therapy when she was a minor, but stopped when she turned 18. Ever since then, her anxiety's been out of control, and due to this, she won't drive anymore. She has a license but refuses to drive. We live in the USA, and driving is basically needed, or it's a big inconvenience for the people around her. Also, she's an adult, so it's not like we can force her to drive. This is the issue. My son was getting married, and she was uncomfortable with so many people around at his wedding. She asked me to take her home. I told her no, and that if she was having difficulties, she should wait in the car. She told me it was freezing outside, and she needed to leave. I told her no again, to turn on the heat in the car, and to wait if she needed to be away from people. She didn't like this answer, and told me that she would have an attack if she stayed, and she needed to go home. I told her to take an Uber, that I was not leaving. She didn't like this, and this was turning into a full argument. Shelly told me I needed to take her home again, and I had enough. I told Shelley she was being selfish, that she had a ton of options, and that I wouldn't deprive her brother, my son, of his parents being at his wedding. If I took her home, I would miss his wedding, since it was an hour's drive here. She called me a jerk and left to stay in the car for a bit. She was back about an hour later for the rest of the wedding. She's been angry since, and her younger brother is copying her. Am I the idiot? Thank God you said no. Notice how she magically was able to cope when push came to shove. That tells you a lot. She's used to getting her way, and it's high time she starts living in the real world and taking responsibility for her own life. She needs to stop using anxiety, a perfectly normal emotion, as an excuse not to push herself to learn tools to cope and take responsibility for her own life and future, including seeking therapy if needed. Her emotional manipulation and threats need to lose the power they've had in the past. Not the idiot. It's called good parenting. She's 19, not 9. Notice how she didn't say, I might have a panic attack, but rather, drive me home, or I will have a panic attack. She's weaponized her anxiety disorder. I wouldn't be surprised if the older bro had a ton of stories about her, using her anxiety as a way to hijack lots of important moments in his life while growing up. OP, your poor son would have never forgotten it if you left. Exactly. Shelley's been accommodated for way too long. She does nothing to manage or mitigate her own issues and expects everyone else to drop everything to do what she feels she needs. Thinking that it's okay to pull you away from your son's wedding? That's absolutely unacceptable. You need to start dealing with her differently, showing respect for yourself and others. It's her choice whether or not she goes to therapy. It is your choice whether or not you're a full-time caretaker and chauffeur to a grown woman who refuses to treat her own illness. She needs professional help and personal boundaries. I, 30 male, have been with my girlfriend, Kelly, 29, for 4 years and have known her for 10. Kelly's autistic, and one of her biggest problems is food. However, since getting together with me, she has opened up to a lot of new foods. For example, she wouldn't eat certain vegetables, as they are, but wouldn't mind having them blended in or cut into small pieces or spirals. Now my brother Kevin, 35, has recently proposed to his girlfriend of 3 years, Laura. He mentioned he had some news to announce and asked whether I'd be okay with him hosting a family dinner at my place since I love cooking. I said it wouldn't be a problem, and we've decided on a Japanese theme. Now to the issue. For the main dish, I made ramen, including the noodles and broth from scratch. It had to be chicken as Kelly doesn't like beef or pork, and my mother also doesn't eat pork. I've added some extra veggies, zucchini, carrots, sweet corn, and some others for Kelly's portion, since she's not fond of eggs. So naturally, her ramen was served without an egg, while everyone else had a standard portion, enough to fill up a grown man. I've also ensured some snacks were on the table, like tempura, yakitori skewers, onigiri, etc. Well, within the first half an hour of her being here, Laura kept picking on Kelly and kept saying she can't say she likes ramen because her version is not authentic. None of us are Asian or have any ties to Asia, if that matters, which was upsetting to her and meant that Kelly started to eat significantly slower compared to the rest of the group. It happens when she gets anxious. Then Laura tried to grab some of Kelly's ramen to try and prove the point, so Kelly freaked out since she doesn't like sharing food that's already on her plate. This resulted in an argument between Kelly and Laura, and Kelly began to cry due to being overwhelmed. After this, I asked my brother and Laura to leave. My parents were absolutely terrified over how Laura behaved towards Kelly and hinted that Laura should apologize. They ended up leaving, but later, I received a call from Kevin, calling me an idiot for kicking them out and spoiling Laura's pregnancy reveal. He also wasn't happy about our mother scolding him over Laura's behavior. Am I the idiot for kicking my brother and his fiancée out from my house? Not the idiot. How would she prove a point by grabbing Kelly's ramen? Because there wasn't an egg in it? This is all bizarre. Laura's a nut job, and your brother's in for a long, hard life. Good on you and your mom for sticking up for your girlfriend. Laura ruined her own night. All she had to do was eat her food and make her stupid announcement. I hope your girlfriend is doing okay. I certainly understand sudden loss of appetite when an anxious spell occurs. Hopefully your brother and his fiancée can reflect and realize they were in the wrong here. Laura is a mean girl. Not gonna lie. The idea of needing to gather a group and be the center of attention for a personal announcement is pretty cringe in the first place. I don't say this often, but I feel sorry for this kid if this is how she behaves among family because of a bowl of ramen. Who knows how she'll treat her own kid?
My name is Jennifer, and I'm a 30-year-old interior designer living in Charlotte, North Carolina. Life once felt so secure. I had supportive parents, a blossoming career, and a husband I adored. But everything changed when I lost my parents unexpectedly. They left me a remarkable legacy, a breathtaking mansion worth $50 million, filled with memories and their dreams for my future. My husband, Harper, and I moved into this mansion soon after their passing. Each room was a reminder of my family's love and dedication. I was determined to honor their legacy by making this house our sanctuary, a place to build our dreams and eventually start a family. Harper, a 37-year-old project manager, initially seemed supportive, sharing my excitement as we settled in. But his attitude shifted when his mother, Charlotte, learned about the inheritance. What began as warm congratulations quickly turned into something more self-serving. Charlotte started hinting at family support and the idea of sharing in each other's fortune. One afternoon, as I was finalizing a new interior design project, Charlotte showed up unannounced. Her demeanor was assertive. She didn't waste time, proposing a plan that took me aback. Charlotte wanted $12 million to buy herself a luxurious home, suggesting it was only fair she too should experience the lifestyle I was lucky enough to inherit. Her reasoning: as family, she claimed, she deserved a share of the fortune I'd inherited. Jennifer, she said with a tight smile, think of it as an investment in our family's future. After all, if you're able to live in luxury, why shouldn't we all? I was stunned. Keeping calm, I explained that I couldn't, in good conscience, give away such a large amount from my inheritance. This house was part of my family's legacy, and I had specific plans to preserve it. Her face darkened. So, you don't care about supporting your family? She retorted. She turned to Harper, attempting to involve him in the conversation. Doesn't it seem fair, Harper, that Jennifer would want to share some of what she's been given? Harper looked uncomfortable, visibly caught between his mother and me. He'd always been close to her, and I could see she was trying to pull him to her side. Jennifer, Harper said hesitantly, glancing between us, maybe we should at least talk about it. I felt my heart sink. The man who had once been my rock now seemed to be wavering. The weight of their expectations felt like a heavy burden. Please, Harper, I said, holding my ground. This house is more than just wealth. It's my parents' legacy. They worked hard to build this. It's not simply about money, it's about honoring their memory. I can't just give up such a large portion on a whim. Charlotte's eyes narrowed, her tone growing colder. A whim, Jennifer. Don't forget that you wouldn't have had anyone to lean on if it weren't for our family's support after your parents passed. And this is how you repay us. My pulse quickened, yet I kept my composure. Charlotte, I value the support you've shown me, but that doesn't mean I owe you $12 million for a luxury home. I am more than willing to help in other ways, but not in this manner. She glared at Harper, her frustration evident. Is this the woman you chose to marry, Harper? Someone who cares more about money than about family? Harper shifted uncomfortably, his gaze dropping to the floor. Jennifer, she's not asking for the entire inheritance. It's just a portion. Maybe we can compromise. My heart ached. The man I once believed would always stand by my side was now faltering. Harper, this isn't something I'm willing to compromise on. This house and the inheritance mean everything to me. I've already sacrificed a lot, and I won't be pressured into giving away what my parents worked so hard for. Charlotte scoffed, her voice tinged with contempt. Typical. You get a little money, and suddenly you think you're better than us. Family doesn't hoard, family shares. With that, she stormed out, leaving a tense silence behind. I looked to Harper, hoping he'd see my perspective, but his silence only deepened my frustration. Over the following days, Charlotte's attitude grew colder, her visits marked by icy remarks about selfishness and family obligations. Harper, rather than standing up for me, grew distant, caught between his mother's demands and my resolve. One evening, Charlotte arrived with Harper's sister, Amanda. It felt like an ambush, and I braced myself as they sat in the living room, their expressions hardened. Charlotte wasted no time. Jennifer, she began sharply, it's clear you don't understand family obligations. We're family, and we should all benefit from your good fortune. $12 million is a fair request, but you continue to refuse. It's incredibly selfish. Amanda joined in, her voice dripping with disdain. It's not right for you to keep everything while we struggle. Don't you see how that makes you look? I looked over to Harper, hoping he'd step in, but he sat silently, avoiding eye contact. Taking a deep breath, I replied, this inheritance was meant to secure my future, not to fulfill demands that have nothing to do with actual needs. I won't apologize for protecting what my parents left for me. Charlotte's face flushed with anger. She stood abruptly, eyes blazing. You think you're better than us because of this money, don't you? You wouldn't have anything if it weren't for this family support. I tried to keep my cool, but her words struck a nerve. I've helped where I can, but that doesn't mean I'll hand over millions because you demand it. At that, Charlotte's patience snapped. In a swift, furious motion, she reached out and slapped me hard across the face. I staggered back, shocked, feeling the sting on my cheek. How dare you disrespect me, she spat, her face twisted with fury. You don't understand loyalty or family, Amanda sneered, her tone venomous. You don't belong here, Jennifer. This house would be better without you. Steadying myself, I held back the rush of emotions. Get out of my house, I said firmly, my voice low but unyielding. You've crossed every boundary, and I won't tolerate this any longer. Harper stood by, frozen in shock, torn between loyalty to his mother and his commitment to me. But instead of defending me, he looked away, refusing to meet my gaze. As Charlotte and Amanda left without a hint of remorse, I felt a surge of strength. Straightening myself, I touched my cheek, the sting reminding me of how far they had pushed me. Harper, I said, my voice trembling with a mix of hurt and determination. Are you really going to let this happen? Your family just attacked me in our home, and you're standing here saying nothing. Harper looked torn, his voice barely a whisper. Jennifer, maybe if you just listened, this wouldn't have happened. His words hurt deeper than the slap. So you think I deserve this? I asked, my voice filled with disbelief. You're willing to let them treat me like this and then blame me for it. Charlotte's words echoed in the air as she walked out, her voice sharp. This isn't over, Jennifer. Either you give us what we're due, or you'll regret it. I felt my patience snap. I've had enough. You can't bully me into handing over what's mine, and if you won't leave willingly, I'll ensure you're forced out. I took a deep breath, pulling out my phone and dialing my lawyer. Charlotte's face twisted in fury as she tried to snatch my phone, but I stepped back, keeping it out of her reach. You're making a mistake, she hissed. You're turning against family. You'll regret this, Jennifer, Amanda added. No one goes against us and wins. Holding up my hand, I stopped them. I've heard enough. Leave my house now. If you come here again without my permission, I'll involve the authorities. Charlotte scoffed, her expression defiant. We'll see about that. With a final glare, Charlotte and Amanda stormed out, leaving an oppressive silence in their wake. Harper lingered for a moment, casting one last conflicted look in my direction before following them out, leaving me standing alone in my home. As soon as they left, the weight of what had happened hit me. I had been attacked in my own home, and Harper, the man who had once promised to stand by me, had chosen his family over me. The betrayal felt like a physical blow, but I knew I couldn't allow them to intimidate me into giving up my inheritance. I picked up my phone and called Mr. Thomas, my lawyer, explaining the entire situation. He listened patiently, his voice calm and reassuring. Jennifer, he said, it sounds like your in-laws are attempting to exploit your inheritance. We can take immediate legal steps to secure your property and prevent any further harassment. My advice is to file for a restraining order against them. This will ensure they cannot approach you or the mansion without serious consequences. Relief washed over me. Thank you, Mr. Thomas. I'll gather any documents you need right away. I just want to ensure they can't pull any more stunts like this. Good plan, he replied. Also, document everything that happened today, including the physical attack and any witnesses if possible. This will help us build a strong case. Determined, I spent the next few hours gathering all relevant paperwork, property deeds, my parents' will, and any documents proving my sole ownership of the mansion. I carefully documented every detail of the confrontation, including Charlotte's physical assault and Harper's refusal to intervene. The following day, I met with Mr. Thomas at his office. I handed over the paperwork, and he quickly filed for a restraining order against Charlotte, Amanda, and anyone else who attempted to violate my rights to the property. Within days, the restraining order was in place, and for the first time in a while, I felt a sense of peace. However, Harper's behavior only became more distant. He avoided eye contact, spent most of his time at his mother's, and showed no signs of remorse for his family's actions. One evening, Harper returned home, looking somber. He sat across from me, fidgeting uncomfortably. Jennifer, this whole situation has gotten out of hand, he began. My family feels betrayed. Can't we find a way to resolve this without dragging it through the courts? I looked at him, my patience thinning. Harper, your family has crossed every boundary imaginable. Charlotte physically attacked me, and you stood by saying nothing. This isn't just a disagreement, it's about protecting what's rightfully mine. He sighed, looking away. I just don't want to lose my family. I could feel the pain in my voice as I replied, and what about me, Harper? I was supposed to be your family too. You're asking me to give up my parents' legacy as if it means nothing. Is that what family loyalty looks like to you? He didn't respond, and after a tense silence, he stood up and walked away, leaving me with a heavy heart yet more resolute than ever. Days passed, and I focused on reinforcing my boundaries. I was determined to protect my inheritance and my parents' legacy, even if it meant standing alone. Harper grew more withdrawn, choosing to spend most of his time with Charlotte and Amanda. Just when I thought things had finally quieted down, Charlotte made an even bolder move. One afternoon, she arrived at the mansion with Amanda and Harper's brother, Jeremy. To my shock, they had brought movers and were prepared to take possession of the house as if they had every right to it. Watching them from the window, fury and disbelief surged through me. How could they blatantly ignore the restraining order and assume they were above the law? Without hesitation, I picked up my phone and dialed 911. Hello, this is Jennifer Blake, I said calmly. My in-laws are trespassing on my property despite a court-ordered restraining order. They've even brought movers to forcefully enter my home. I need the police here immediately. The dispatcher assured me that officers were on their way. Steeling myself, I went outside to confront them, unwilling to let them bully me further. Charlotte spotted me, her face twisted in disdain. "Jennifer, stop this nonsense. This is a family matter, and the police have no place here. If you had an ounce of decency, you'd share what you have." I held my ground, my voice steady. "This is my home, and you have no right to take it from me." Amanda stepped forward, her tone mocking. "You're making this harder than it needs to be, Jennifer. Just hand over the $12 million and make it easier on everyone." Before I could respond, I heard sirens approaching. Charlotte's face paled as the reality of the situation sank in. The police arrived, assessing the scene with serious expressions. I approached one of the officers and handed over the restraining order. "Officer, these individuals have been ordered by the court to stay away from my property. They're violating that order and attempting to seize my home," I explained. The officer nodded and turned towards Charlotte, Amanda, and Jeremy with a stern look. "Ma'am, you are trespassing on private property and are in violation of a court-issued restraining order. You must leave immediately, or we will be forced to take legal action." Charlotte's voice turned shrill as she protested. "This is family business. You have no right to interfere." The officer remained resolute. "If you refuse to comply, you will be arrested." Reluctantly, Charlotte stepped back, her eyes seething with fury as she glared at me. "This isn't over, Jennifer. You'll regret turning your back on this family." I met her gaze with newfound strength. "You're no longer welcome here, Charlotte. This is my home, and I won't let anyone take it from me." As the officers escorted them off the property, I felt a wave of relief. I had taken a stand, defending what was mine against those who sought to manipulate and control me. After that day, I felt something shift inside me. The confrontation had been exhausting, but it also marked the end of an era. I realized I could no longer share my life with someone who allowed his family to trample over my dignity and boundaries. The betrayal ran too deep, and I knew it was time to make a clean break for the sake of my peace and future. Later that evening, Harper returned, looking tired and conflicted. I could tell he'd heard about what happened from his mother. His face held a mixture of anger and sorrow as he approached me. "Jennifer," he began softly, "we can't keep doing this. This isn't the life I envisioned for us. My family is hurt and feels abandoned. Isn't there a way we can avoid all this legal conflict?" I looked at him, feeling a mix of sadness and clarity. "Harper, I gave your family every opportunity to respect my boundaries. I tried to find common ground, but they refused to listen. Your mother physically attacked me, and you just stood there. This isn't just a family disagreement, it's a matter of safety, respect, and protecting what's rightfully mine." Harper sighed, unable to meet my gaze. "I just don't want to lose my family," he muttered. "And what about me, Harper?" I replied, my voice trembling with emotion. "I was supposed to be your family too. But every time they made demands, you chose them over me. Is that the kind of loyalty I'm supposed to accept?" A heavy silence filled the room as my words settled over him. Harper shifted uncomfortably and finally seemed to understand that this was the end. His shoulders slumped, and he nodded slightly, unable to hold my gaze. "I guess I can't undo what's already happened," he whispered, almost to himself. "No, Harper," I replied gently. "And I can't keep sacrificing my peace for a relationship that's one-sided. It's time for both of us to move forward." With that, I asked him to gather his belongings and leave the mansion. There were no arguments, no pleas to reconsider. Within hours, he was gone, and I stood alone in the quiet of the mansion. Though I felt the weight of the decision, I also sensed a newfound lightness, knowing I had reclaimed control over my life. In the following weeks, I channeled my energy into rebuilding. I hired contractors to restore and redesign parts of the mansion, transforming it into a reflection of my resilience and independence. Each room became a tribute to my journey, each piece of art or furniture a symbol of my strength and new beginnings. The mansion, once a solemn reminder of my parents' legacy, was now a sanctuary, a place of empowerment and freedom. I reconnected with friends, poured myself into my work, and even began volunteering in local art programs to give back to the community. With every step forward, I felt the weight of the past lift, replaced by a sense of quiet confidence and joy I hadn't known in years. One evening, as I watched the sunset from the mansion's grand balcony, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't experienced in a long time. The journey had been painful, but I had emerged stronger, more self-assured, and ready to embrace the life I had fought so hard to protect. This mansion was no longer just a house, it was a testament to my courage and a reminder of the strength I possessed to stand on my own. For the first time in years, I was ready to move forward, knowing that my life was now entirely my own and that I had the power to shape my destiny, free from the shadows of the past. If you enjoyed Jennifer's story of strength and resilience, don't forget to like, leave a comment with your thoughts, and subscribe for more powerful stories. Stay tuned for the next tale of unexpected twists and unforgettable moments.
Welcome to another story on Cheating Tales Lab. We're so happy to have you here, and today's story is one we think you'll really enjoy. So without further ado, let's begin. Ethan Reeves wiped his hands on a greasy rag, the smell of motor oil clinging to his skin like a second layer. The '67 Mustang gleamed under the harsh fluorescent lights of the high-end auto restoration shop. He glanced at his watch, 8:45 p.m. Olivia would be wondering where he was. As if on cue, his phone buzzed. A text from his wife. Working late. Don't wait up. Ethan's jaw clenched. Third time this week. He typed back a terse okay, and tossed the phone onto his workbench with more force than necessary. The drive home was a blur of streetlights and racing thoughts. When he pulled into the driveway, the house was dark. Olivia's car was gone. Inside, Ethan poured himself a whiskey neat. He sank into his favorite armchair, the leather creaking under his weight. The house felt too quiet, too empty. His eyes landed on Olivia's open laptop on the coffee table. He shouldn't. He really shouldn't. But the whiskey burned away his reservations. Ethan leaned forward, tapping the space bar to wake the screen. A string of emails popped up. Nothing incriminating, but something about the tone of the exchanges with her co-workers seemed off. Too familiar, too flirtatious. A key in the lock made him snap the laptop shut. Olivia breezed in, her cheeks flushed and hair slightly disheveled. "Oh, you're still up," she said, surprise coloring her voice. "I thought I told you not to wait." Ethan forced a smile. "Just got in myself. Busy day at the shop." Olivia nodded, distracted. Her phone chimed and she glanced at it, a small smile playing at her lips before she quickly schooled her features. "I'm beat," she announced. "Heading to bed. Don't stay up too late." As she climbed the stairs, Ethan's eyes narrowed. The seeds of suspicion, once planted, began to take root. Over the next few weeks, Ethan found himself hyper-aware of Olivia's movements. Strange phone calls at odd hours became the norm. She'd step out onto the porch, speaking in hushed tones. When he'd ask who it was, she'd wave it off as work stuff with a tight smile. The work emergencies multiplied. Late nights at the office, sudden weekend meetings. Each time, Ethan's unease grew. One evening, as Olivia showered, Ethan found himself staring at her purse. The temptation to look inside gnawed at him. With a deep breath, he reached in and pulled out her wallet. Flipping it open, he found their shared credit card statement. His eyes widened as he scanned the charges. Upscale restaurants he'd never heard of, hotels in the city. His stomach churned. The sound of the shower stopping jolted him back to reality. He hastily shoved the statement back into her wallet and returned it to her purse, heart pounding. That night, as Olivia slept soundly beside him, Ethan made a decision. He had crossed a line by looking at her wallet, but he couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. The next day, on his lunch break, he purchased a small GPS tracker. His hand shook slightly as he installed it in Olivia's car, hidden beneath the dashboard. The guilt of invading her privacy warred with his need to know the truth. Over the next week, Ethan obsessively checked the tracker's data. Most of Olivia's movements were innocuous. Her office, the gym, the grocery store. But then a pattern emerged. Frequent visits to an affluent neighborhood across town, always during her supposed late nights at the office. The final straw came when he checked their online banking and noticed a series of large transfers from their joint account to an account he didn't recognize. Ethan's hands clenched into fists. He needed answers, and he needed them now. The business card felt heavy in Ethan's hand. Mia Chun, private investigator. Her office was tucked away in a nondescript building downtown, the kind of place you'd walk by 100 times without noticing. Mia was all business, her dark eyes sharp as she listened to Ethan's suspicions. "I'll need a week," she said. "Maybe 2. I'll be discreet." Ethan nodded, swallowing hard. "Just find out the truth, whatever it is." The next 10 days were agony. Ethan went through the motions at work, his mind constantly elsewhere. He barely slept, lying awake listening to Olivia's steady breathing beside him, wondering if she was dreaming of someone else. When Mia finally called, her voice was grim. "I have what you need. Meet me at my office." The manila envelope Mia slid across her desk might as well have been filled with TNT. Ethan's hand shook as he opened it, spilling out a stack of high-resolution photos. Olivia, laughing over wine at a candlelit restaurant. Olivia, entering a hotel, a tall man's arm around her waist. Olivia, kissing that same man passionately in an elevator. "His name is Dr. Nathaniel Hawthorne," Mia said quietly. "He's a neurosurgeon at St. Mary's Hospital." Ethan felt the blood drain from his face. He recognized the name. Olivia had mentioned him in passing, a new doctor at her firm's biggest client. "I'm sorry," Mia added, genuine sympathy in her voice. Ethan nodded woodenly, gathering up the photos. "You did your job. Thank you." The drive home was a blur. Ethan's mind raced, replaying every moment of the past few months through this new, horrible lens. How long had it been going on? How could he have been so blind? Olivia was in the kitchen when he walked in, humming as she chopped vegetables for dinner. She looked up with a smile that quickly faded when she saw his expression. "Ethan, what's wrong?" He slapped the envelope down on the counter. "Care to explain?" Olivia's face went pale as she looked at the contents. For a long moment, there was only silence. Then her eyes hardened. "You had me followed? How dare you invade my privacy like that?" Ethan laughed bitterly. "Your privacy? That's rich, coming from someone who's been lying to my face for God knows how long." "It's not what you think," Olivia began, but Ethan cut her off. Don't you dare try to gaslight me. I've seen the evidence with my own eyes." Olivia's face crumpled. "Ethan, please. We can work through this. It was a mistake, I swear." But Ethan wasn't listening. His eyes had caught on Olivia's phone on the counter. Screen lit up with a new message. From Nate. In that moment, something in Ethan snapped. He grabbed the phone, ignoring Olivia's protests. "Warn Nathaniel," he read aloud, his voice dangerously calm. "About what exactly? The investigation? Or the fact that your idiot husband finally caught on?" Olivia's silence was all the confirmation he needed. Ethan set the phone down carefully, his mind already racing ahead to what needed to be done. "I'm going for a drive," he said flatly. "Don't wait up." As he walked out, he could hear Olivia on the phone behind him, her voice low and urgent, warning her lover, no doubt. Let her. It didn't matter now. Ethan drove aimlessly for hours, the betrayal eating away at him like acid. By the time he returned home in the early hours of the morning, his shock had crystallized into something harder, colder. A plan was forming in his mind. Olivia was asleep when he crept into the bedroom. In the pale moonlight, she looked peaceful, beautiful. Ethan felt a twinge of the love he'd once felt for her, quickly swallowed by a tide of bitter rage. He wouldn't confront her. Not yet. For now, he'd play the fool, the trusting husband. And all the while, he'd be planning for the day when he'd make them both pay for every lie, every betrayal. Ethan slipped into bed, his mind racing with possibilities. As he drifted off to an uneasy sleep, one thought echoed in his mind. Revenge would be sweet. Nature, it seemed, had a twisted sense of timing. 3 days after Ethan's world imploded, the skies opened up. Rain lashed against windows. Wind howled through trees, and the normally placid river that ran through town swelled to monstrous proportions. Ethan stood in the doorway of his shop, watching as muddy water crept ever closer. Most of the other businesses on the street had already evacuated, their owners fleeing with whatever valuables they could carry. Ethan, his boss Frank, shouted over the howling wind, "We gotta go, son. It's not safe." Ethan nodded numbly, taking one last look at the classic cars they'd worked so hard to restore. The '67 Mustang he'd just finished gleamed under the emergency lights, about to be swallowed by the flood. As they drove to higher ground, Ethan's phone buzzed. A text from Olivia. "Are you safe? The hospital's evacuating non-critical patients. I'm helping coordinate. Might be late." He typed back a terse, "I'm fine," and tossed the phone onto the passenger seat. Let her worry. It was the least she deserved. The next few days were chaos. The flood ravaged the town, leaving destruction in its wake. Ethan's shop was hit hard, water and mud ruining years of work and hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of classic cars. When the waters finally receded, the full extent of the damage became clear. Frank stood in the middle of the ruined shop, his face ashen. I don't know if we can come back from this, Ethan," he said quietly. "The insurance, it might not be enough. I might have to close up for good." Ethan felt a knot form in his stomach. The shop had been his life for years. The thought of losing it, on top of everything else. That evening, he sat at the kitchen table, surrounded by insurance forms and damage reports. Olivia bustled around, making coffee and fussing over him. "Maybe this is a sign," she said tentatively. Maybe we should think about moving. Starting fresh somewhere new." Ethan's head snapped up. For a moment, he thought he saw a flicker of guilt in her eyes. Was she suggesting this out of remorse? Or was she looking for an easy way out? A chance to be closer to her lover? But then a thought struck him. A move that could work in his favor. Give him the space and time he needed to put his plan into action. "You know what?" he said, forcing a smile. "Maybe you're right. A fresh start could be good for us." Olivia's relief was palpable. She reached across the table, squeezing his hand. "We'll get through this together, honey. I promise." Ethan squeezed back, his mind already racing ahead. Yes, they'd move. And while Olivia thought they were working on their marriage, he'd be setting the stage for his revenge. Over the next few weeks, as they dealt with the aftermath of the flood, Ethan began quietly laying the groundwork for his plan. He started liquidating assets, squirreling away money in accounts Olivia didn't know about. He researched new identities, offshore banking, ways to disappear. All the while, he played the part of the devoted husband. He listened to Olivia's empty promises to work on their marriage, nodded along as she talked about couples therapy. He even managed to choke out, "I love you," when needed, though the words tasted like ash in his mouth. One night, as Olivia slept, Ethan found himself drawn to her laptop again. This time, he didn't hesitate. He needed information, ammunition for what was to come. What he found made his blood boil. Email after email between Olivia and Nathaniel, full of flowery declarations of love and explicit details of their encounters. But it was the financial information that really caught his eye. Olivia had been siphoning money from their joint accounts into a private one. Thousands of dollars, meant for their future, now earmarked for a life with another man. Ethan's hands shook as he copied down the account details. This was it, the final piece he needed. With this, he could destroy them both, financially, professionally, personally. As he closed the laptop, a calm settled over him. The path ahead was clear now. Olivia and Nathaniel thought they were so clever, so in control. They had no idea what was coming. Ethan slipped back into bed, his mind racing with plans. The perfect storm had given him the perfect opportunity. Now, all he had to do was wait for the right moment to strike. Ethan Reeves sat in the dark, the blue glow of his laptop screen illuminating his face. His fingers flew across the keyboard, crafting a digital persona with the precision of a master forger. Alex Sterling, venture capitalist extraordinaire, was coming to life. He'd always had a knack for computers, a hobby that had taken a back seat to his mechanical skills. Now, that hidden talent was the linchpin of his revenge. LinkedIn profile? Check. Carefully curated Twitter feed? Done. A sleek website for Sterling Ventures, complete with glowing testimonials from shell companies? Perfect. Ethan leaned back, admiring his handiwork. Alex Sterling was everything he wasn't. Wealthy, connected, and passionate about cutting-edge medical technology. The perfect bait for a certain ambitious neurosurgeon. He glanced at the clock. 3:47 a.m. Olivia would be waking up soon, heading to the hospital for her early shift. To her lover, Ethan's jaw clenched. He forced himself to take a deep breath. Patience. That's what this whole charade was about. Patience and planning. He navigated to Dr. Nathaniel Hawthorne's professional networking profile. His mouse hovered over the connect button. This was it. The first domino. Click. Across town in a luxurious penthouse apartment, Dr. Nathaniel Hawthorne's phone buzzed. He groaned, reaching for it blindly in the dark. Olivia stirred beside him. "What is it?" she mumbled sleepily. "Nothing, darling. Go back to sleep." Nathaniel squinted at the screen, a notification from his professional networking app catching his eye. A connection request from Alex Sterling? The name wasn't familiar, but the profile was intriguing. CEO of Sterling Ventures, specializing in medical technology investments. Nathaniel's heart raced. This could be the break he'd been waiting for. His research was groundbreaking, but funding was always an issue. If he could get an investor, like Sterling, interested, he accepted the request without hesitation, already composing a message in his head. This could change everything. Back in his home office, Ethan allowed himself a small, grim smile as the acceptance notification popped up. Hook, line, and sinker. Over the next few weeks, Alex and Nathaniel exchanged a flurry of messages. Ethan played his part perfectly, expressing keen interest in Nathaniel's research while dangling the possibility of substantial funding. Olivia noticed the change in her lover. Nathaniel was distracted, constantly checking his phone, staying late at the lab. "Is everything all right?" she asked one night over dinner at their favorite upscale restaurant, the same one where Ethan had first seen them together in Mia's photographs. Nathaniel's eyes gleamed with excitement. "Better than all right. I might have found an investor for my project. If this pans out, Olivia, we're talking millions in funding. It could change everything." Olivia's heart swelled. This was what she'd been waiting for. A chance to start over, to leave behind the guilt and the lies. "That's wonderful, Nate. Tell me everything." As Nathaniel launched into an explanation of neural interfaces and groundbreaking therapies, Ethan sat alone in his home office, monitoring their conversation through the bug he'd planted in Olivia's purse. His hands clenched into fists as he listened to them plan their future together. Soon, he thought, soon they'd see just how quickly dreams could turn to ashes. The next day, Alex sent Nathaniel a proposal, a chance to fast-track his research, to push the boundaries of what was possible. All he needed to do was bend a few rules, skirt a few ethical guidelines. Nathaniel hesitated. It was risky if anyone found out, but the potential rewards were too great to ignore. With trembling hands, he replied to Alex. "I'm in." Ethan leaned back in his chair, a wolfish grin spreading across his face. The trap was set. Now, all he had to do was wait for his prey to stumble into it. Dr. Melissa Chung, head of the Medical Ethics Board at St. Mary's Hospital, frowned at her computer screen. The anonymous email she received was troubling, to say the least. Allegations of unethical research practices, patient safety concerns, forged consent forms, all pointing to one of their most prominent surgeons, Dr. Nathaniel Hawthorne. She'd always had reservations about Hawthorne. Brilliant, yes, but there was an arrogance to him that set her on edge. And now this. With a heavy sigh, she picked up her phone. "Sarah, get me the hospital administrator. We need to launch an investigation. And contact Dr. Hawthorne's department. All his research is to be put on hold, effective immediately." Across town, in his opulent office, Nathaniel's world was crumbling around him. His phone hadn't stopped ringing all morning. The ethics board, the hospital administrator, even the local medical licensing board, all demanding answers he couldn't give. How had they found out? He'd been so careful. A soft knock at the door made him jump. Olivia slipped in, her face pale with worry. "Nate, what's going on? There are rumors flying all over the hospital." Nathaniel said, "I don't know. Someone's accused me of—" "God, Olivia, it's bad. Falsifying data, endangering patients. They're saying I've violated every ethical guideline in the book." Olivia's hand flew to her mouth. "But that's not true, is it? Tell me it's not true." The silence that followed was deafening. "Nate," he couldn't meet her eyes. I might have cut a few corners, pushed things a little faster than regulations allowed, but it was for the greater good. Don't you see? With Alex's funding, we were on the verge of a breakthrough." Olivia felt the floor drop out from under her. "Alex, the investor? Nate, what have you done?" Before he could answer, his phone buzzed again. A text from an unknown number. "Check your email." With trembling fingers, Nathaniel opened his inbox. His blood ran cold. There, in his sent folder, was an email he had no memory of writing, addressed to the ethics board, the hospital administration, even local news outlets. A full confession of his misdeeds, along with, oh God, photos of him and Olivia in compromising positions, in his office, in on-call rooms. "No," he whispered. "No, no, no." Olivia peered over his shoulder, her face draining of color. "How? Who?" The pieces fell into place with sickening clarity. Ethan, it had to be. But how? How could he have orchestrated all of this? Across town, in a nondescript internet cafe, Ethan allowed himself a moment of satisfaction as he hit send on the final email. The dominoes were falling, faster and harder than even he had anticipated. He'd underestimated how quickly Nathaniel would compromise his ethics in pursuit of glory and funding. It had made his job almost too easy. A few well-placed keyloggers, some carefully timed system updates pushed to Nathaniel's devices, and he'd had access to everything. Emails, text messages, even webcam footage. The photos had been a stroke of luck. He hadn't expected them to be so careless, to flaunt their affair right under the noses of their colleagues. But their arrogance had played right into his hands. Now, it was time for the final blow. Olivia's phone buzzed. A notification from her banking app. With shaking hands, she opened it, already knowing what she would find. The secret account she'd set up, the one she'd been funneling money into for months, planning for a fresh start with Nathaniel, it was empty. Every last cent gone. A text message flashed across her screen. From Ethan. "Thought you could hide it from me? Game over, Olivia. I want a divorce." Olivia's knees gave out. She sank to the floor of Nathaniel's office, her world collapsing around her. Nathaniel was too lost in his own panic to notice. His phone was ringing again. The hospital administrator, demanding he turn himself in for questioning. In that moment, as sirens began to wail in the distance, Olivia realized the true extent of her mistakes. She'd thrown away a good man, a good life for this, a house of cards built on lies and betrayal, now crumbling to dust. The garage was silent save for the soft clink of tools and the occasional muffled curse. Ethan wiped sweat from his brow, stepping back to admire his handiwork. The 1969 Chevrolet Camaro gleamed under the harsh fluorescent lights, its midnight blue paint job flawless. To the untrained eye, it was simply a beautifully restored classic. But Ethan knew better. Every inch of this car had been modified, the engine tuned for maximum performance and minimal noise. The gas tank expanded and reinforced. Hidden compartments built into the doors, the trunk, even under the seats. A state-of-the-art GPS scrambler and a top-of-the-line communications system, all carefully concealed. This wasn't just a car. It was an escape plan on wheels. Ethan ran his hand along the smooth fender, a bittersweet smile playing at his lips. In another life, he might have restored this beauty out of pure love for the craft. Now, it was just another tool in his arsenal, a means to an end. He glanced at his watch. 2:17 a.m. In a few hours, the world would wake up to find Ethan Reeves had vanished into thin air. The new driver's license felt strange in his hands. Gabriel Foster, it proclaimed in bold letters. Born in Oregon, recently moved to Colorado. A successful classic car restorer, looking to start fresh in a new city. Ethan, no! Gabriel now took one last look around the garage. 5 years of his life, packed into boxes and duffel bags. Everything else had been sold, donated, or simply left behind. No loose ends. He'd been tempted to leave a note. For Olivia, for his former colleagues, for anyone who might wonder what had become of Ethan Reeves. But in the end, he decided against it. Let them wonder. Let them feel a fraction of the uncertainty and betrayal he'd experienced. The Camaro's engine purred to life, a sound so smooth it was barely audible. Gabriel eased it out of the garage and onto the quiet, pre-dawn streets. As he drove past Olivia's there, house one last time, he allowed himself a moment of reflection. 5 years of marriage, a lifetime of memories, all reduced to ashes by her betrayal. He thought of Olivia and Nathaniel, probably huddled together in some lawyer's office, trying to salvage what was left of their reputations and careers. Let them have each other, he thought bitterly. They deserved no better. The for sale sign on their front lawn flickered in his headlights as he drove past. Another piece of bait. He'd hired a realtor under a false name, left instructions for the proceeds of the sale to be donated to a local children's hospital. It would keep the authorities guessing, wondering if he'd fled the country. As the town limits approached, Gabriel felt a weight lift from his shoulders. Ethan Reeves was dead. His old life, his pain, his betrayal, all of it left behind in the pre-dawn darkness. The open road stretched before him, promising freedom, a new beginning. Gabriel Foster pressed down on the accelerator, the Camaro responding with a throaty growl. He didn't look back. In the days and weeks that followed, the disappearance of Ethan Reeves became the talk of the town. Theories ran wild. Had he embezzled money and fled to South America? Been the victim of foul play? Gone into witness protection? Olivia found herself at the center of a storm of gossip and speculation. The details of her affair with Dr. Hawthorne had leaked, adding fuel to the fire. Every pitying glance, every whispered conversation that stopped when she entered a room was a fresh torment. She'd tried to access the money she'd squirreled away, hoping to hire a private investigator to find Ethan. But the account was empty, cleaned out without a trace. She was left with nothing but questions and regrets. Nathaniel was no help, his career in tatters. Facing potential criminal charges, he'd retreated into himself. The passion that had drawn Olivia to him had curdled into bitterness and self-pity. As she sat alone in their now empty house, surrounded by for sale signs and packed boxes, Olivia felt the full weight of her choices crash down upon her. She'd thrown away a good man, a good life for, what? A fantasy that had crumbled like a house of cards. For the first time, She allowed herself to consider the possibility that Ethan's disappearance wasn't just about running away. The precision of it all, the way he dismantled their lives so thoroughly. This was revenge, served cold and calculated. Olivia shivered, wrapping her arms around herself. Wherever Ethan was, whatever he'd become, she had a sinking feeling that this was far from over. Miles away, on a winding mountain road, Gabriel Foster smiled as he caught a glimpse of his new home city in the distance. The Camaro purred beneath him, eating up the miles. A new life awaited, and with it, the next phase of his plan. The growl of a finely tuned engine echoed to the cavernous workshop as Gabriel Foster eased a gleaming 1970 Dodge Challenger onto the lift. He killed the ignition, the sudden silence broken only by the soft ping of cooling metal. 5 years. 5 years since he'd left behind the life of Ethan Reeves. 5 years of building a new identity from the ground up. Gabriel Foster, classic car restoration expert, was now a fixture in this small Colorado town. His business was thriving, his reputation impeccable. He wiped his hands on a rag, surveying his domain. Rows of vintage beauties in various states of repair filled the shop. This was his life now. Simple, uncomplicated, no betrayals, no lies. The crunch of gravel outside pulled him from his reverie. Probably Mrs. Hadley, coming to check on her husband's prize Mustang. Gabriel plastered on his best customer service smile and turned towards the door. The smile froze on his face. The young man who walked in couldn't have been more than 20. Shaggy brown hair, intense green eyes that sparked with a familiar fire. Gabriel felt his stomach lurch. It was like looking at a ghost of his younger self. "Can I help you?" he managed, his voice steadier than he felt. The young man's eyes darted around the shop before settling on Gabriel. "Are you Ethan Reeves?" The name hit Gabriel like a physical blow. He hadn't heard it spoken aloud in years. "I think you got the wrong." "Don't bullshit me," the kid snarled, taking a step closer. "I know who you are. I've spent years tracking you down." Gabriel's mind raced. How had he slipped up? What trail had he left behind? He'd been so careful. "My name is Lucas," the young man continued, his voice shaking slightly. "I'm your son." The world tilted on its axis. Gabriel, no, Ethan, because who was he kidding now? Gripped the edge of a nearby workbench to steady himself. A son? Impossible. Olivia had never been pregnant. Had she? That's not possible, he said, hating how weak his voice sounded. Lucas barked out a harsh laugh. "Yeah, that's what Mom said you'd probably say. Deadbeat dad denies everything, right?" Ethan's shock was quickly replaced by a familiar anger. Of course Olivia would do this. One last twisted knife in his back. "How old are you?" he asked, buying time as his mind whirled. 21 next month. Lucas replied, a hint of defiance in his tone. The math didn't add up. If this kid was telling the truth, he would have been born well before Ethan and Olivia even met, which meant a cold certainty settled over Ethan. He knew exactly what game was being played here. "What do you want, Lucas?" he asked, his voice flat. The young man's bravado faltered slightly. Mom's sick. Cancer. The treatments are expensive, and I'm trying to put myself through college. We need help. You owe us that much, at least." Ethan almost laughed at the audacity of it all. Olivia, using her own son as a pawn in one last desperate grab. He wondered if the kid even knew the full story, or if he was just an unwitting puppet in his mother's schemes. "And if I refuse?" Ethan asked, curious to see how far the charade would go. Lucas's jaw clenched. "Then I'll go to the police. Child abandonment. I'll sue you for back child support. I'll make sure everyone knows what kind of man Ethan Reeves really is." Now Ethan did laugh, a short, bitter sound that made Lucas take a step back. "Kid, you have no idea what kind of man Ethan Reeves really is. But I'll tell you what, come back tomorrow. I'll have something for you then." Lucas hesitated, clearly thrown off by this response. You're not denying it." Ethan shook his head. "Go home, Lucas. Tell your mother you found me. Come back tomorrow at noon, and we'll settle this once and for all. After a moment of tense silence, Lucas nodded jerkily and turned to leave. At the door, he paused. Don't try to run. I'll find you again. Ethan watched him go, a storm of emotions swirling in his chest. When the sound of Lucas's car had faded, he pulled out his phone and dialed a number he hadn't used in years. Mia, it's E.T. It's Gabriel. I need one more favor. The next day, precisely at noon, Lucas stood in Gabriel's workshop, radiating nervous energy. His eyes darted around the room, taking in the tools, the half-restored cars, searching for, what? A sign of the father he'd never known? Some tangible connection to the man who'd abandoned him and his mother? Gabriel watched him silently for a moment, struck again by the physical resemblance. It was uncanny, really, if he hadn't known better. Sit down, Lucas, he said, gesturing to a pair of battered office chairs in the corner. We need to talk. Lucas complied, his earlier bravado seemingly diminished in the harsh light of day. Gabriel took the seat across from him, a manila envelope in his hands. Before we start, I want you to know that I'm sorry, Gabriel began. Lucas's head snapped up, hope flaring in his eyes. You are? Gabriel nodded solemnly. I'm sorry that your mother has put you in this position. I'm sorry that she's used you as a pawn in her games. And I'm sorry for what I'm about to tell you, because it's going to hurt. But you deserve the truth. He opened the envelope and pulled out a sheet of paper, handing it to Lucas. The young man's brow furrowed as he scanned the document. What is this? It's a DNA test result, Gabriel said quietly, performed by one of the most reputable labs in the country. It proves conclusively that I am not your biological father. Lucas's face went pale, then flushed with anger. This is bullshit. You faked this. You're just trying to weasel out of your responsibilities. Gabriel shook his head. I wish it were that simple, kid. But think about it. You said you're almost 21. That means you were born in 2003, right? Lucas nodded warily. I didn't even meet your mother until 2016. We were married in 2018. The math doesn't add up, Lucas. It never did. But Mom said. Your mother lied, Gabriel said, his voice gentle but firm. She's been lying to you for a long time, I suspect. Lucas slumped in his chair, the fight draining out of him. Why would she do that? Gabriel sighed. That's a long story, one I'm not sure you're ready to hear. But I think you need to. Over the next hour, Gabriel, no Ethan, because there was no point in pretending anymore, told Lucas everything. The affair, the betrayal, the elaborate revenge plot. He spared no details, laying bare the ugly truth of it all. Lucas listened in stunned silence, his face a kaleidoscope of emotions, shock, disbelief, anger, grief. When Ethan finished, Lucas sat motionless for a long moment. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, he asked, So who is my real father? Ethan's jaw clenched. Based on the timeline and everything else I know, I'd say it's almost certainly Dr. Nathaniel Hawthorne. Lucas's head snapped up. Mom's boss? The one she's been with since. Since before I left, yes, Ethan confirmed. I'm sorry, Lucas. You deserve better than this. The young man stood abruptly, pacing the small office area. All these years, she told me you ran out on us, that you couldn't handle the responsibility. I've hated you my whole life for abandoning us. And now you know the truth, Ethan finished softly. It's not an easy thing to face, believe me, but it's better than living a lie. Lucas turned to him, his eyes shining with unshed tears. What am I supposed to do now? Mom's sick. She needs help. And I don't even know who I am anymore. Ethan stood, placing a hesitant hand on Lucas's shoulder. You're the same person you've always been, Lucas. Your mother's lies don't change who you are. As for what to do, I think you need to have a long talk with Dr. Hawthorne, and with your mother. Lucas nodded numbly. Yeah, I guess I do. As Lucas turned to leave, Ethan called out, "Wait." He went to his desk, pulled out a checkbook, and quickly wrote something. "Here," he said, handing the check to Lucas. "It's not much, but it should cover your next semester of college, at least. Whatever else has happened, none of this is your fault. You shouldn't have to put your life on hold because of your parents' mistakes." Lucas stared at the check, then back at Ethan. Thank you. I don't know what to say." Ethan shook his head. "You don't have to say anything. Just live your life, Lucas. Don't let the bitterness consume you. Trust me, I know how tempting that can be." After Lucas left, Ethan sank back into his chair, suddenly feeling every one of his years. He'd thought his revenge was complete, that he'd put the past behind him. But seeing the pain in Lucas's eyes, the devastation of a young man whose world had just been turned upside down for the first time, Ethan wondered if the cost of his vengeance had been too high. He shook off the thought. What was done was done. He couldn't change the past. All he could do was move forward. But as he turned back to his work, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't over. Not yet. The call came on a crisp autumn morning, 6 months after Lucas's visit. Ethan was elbow deep in the engine of a '65 Shelby Cobra when his phone buzzed. He almost ignored it, but something made him reach for it. The voice on the other end was unfamiliar, professional. A doctor from his old hometown. Olivia was dying. Stage 4 pancreatic cancer. She didn't have long, and she was asking for him. Ethan's first instinct was to hang up, to pretend he'd never received the call. He'd put that life behind him. Olivia's fate was no longer his concern. But as he stared at the Cobra's gleaming engine, he realized he couldn't let it end like this. There were things that needed to be said, a final reckoning to be had. The drive back to his old hometown was surreal. Familiar landmarks blurred past, ghosts of a life long abandoned. Ethan felt like a stranger in his own skin. Ethan Reeves and Gabriel Foster warring for dominance with each mile that passed. St. Mary's Hospital loomed before him, a place he'd only visited in nightmares for the past 5 years. As he walked through the sterile corridors, the smell of disinfectant and despair assaulting his senses, Ethan steeled himself for what was to come. Room 437. He paused outside the door, his hand on the handle. It wasn't too late to turn back, to drive away and never look back. But he'd come this far. He needed to see it through. Olivia lay in the hospital bed, a pale shadow of the woman he'd once loved. Tubes and wires snaked from her frail body, monitors beeping a soft, steady rhythm. Her eyes were closed, but they fluttered open as he approached. "Ethan," she whispered, her voice a dry rasp. "You came." He stood at the foot of her bed, hands gripping the railing. "I came." Silence stretched between them. Years of unspoken words and buried emotions threatening to suffocate them both. Finally, Olivia spoke again. "I'm sorry. For everything. I know it doesn't change anything, but I needed you to hear it." Ethan's jaw clenched. "You're right. It doesn't change anything." Olivia's eyes filled with tears. "I've lost everything, Ethan. Nathaniel left when the money ran out. Lucas won't speak to me. Not since he found out the truth. And whose fault is that?" Ethan's voice was cold. "You lied to everyone, Olivia. You betrayed me. You used your own son as a pawn. Did you really think there wouldn't be consequences?" She turned her face away, shame etched in every line. "I didn't think. I was selfish and scared, and I'm paying for it now. We all are." Ethan felt his carefully constructed walls beginning to crack. He had imagined this moment so many times over the years, dreamed of standing over Olivia's broken form and feeling nothing but satisfaction. But now, faced with the reality, "Do you know what you did to me?" he asked, his voice low and intense. "Do you have any idea what it's like to have your entire world shattered? To realize that everything you believed in was a lie?" Olivia met his gaze, her eyes clear despite the pain medication coursing through her system. "I think I do now." Ethan laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. Poetic justice, I suppose. You reap what you sow, Olivia. Is that why you're here? She asked. To watch me suffer? To make sure I die alone and in pain? For a moment, Ethan was tempted to say yes, to twist the knife one last time. But as he looked at Olivia, withered and frail in her hospital bed, he felt the last of his anger drain away, replaced by a bone-deep weariness. No, he said softly. I'm here because despite everything, we shared a life once. And I needed to know that it meant something, that it wasn't all a lie. Olivia reached out a trembling hand. After a moment's hesitation, Ethan took it. It wasn't all a lie, she whispered. I did love you, Ethan. Maybe not enough, maybe not the right way, but I did. And I'm so sorry for what I did to you, to us. Ethan nodded, not trusting himself to speak. They sat in silence for a long moment, the rhythmic beeping of the heart monitor, the only sound in the room. Finally, Ethan stood. I should go. Panic flashed in Olivia's eyes. Will you come back? Ethan hesitated. I don't know, he said honestly. I don't think so. This is goodbye, Olivia. She nodded, tears streaming down her gaunt cheeks. I understand. Thank you, Ethan, for coming, for everything. He paused at the door, looking back at the woman who had once been the center of his world. Goodbye, Olivia. I hope you find peace. As Ethan walked out of the hospital, he felt as if a great weight had been lifted from his shoulders. The thirst for vengeance that had driven him for so long was finally quenched, leaving behind a strange, hollow feeling. He climbed into his modified Camaro, the engine purring to life beneath him. As he pulled out of the parking lot, Ethan caught a glimpse of his reflection in the rearview mirror. The man looking back at him was neither Ethan Reeves nor Gabriel Foster. He was someone new, someone forged in the fires of betrayal and tempered by the cold waters of revenge. The open road stretched before him, full of possibilities. Ethan, or whoever he was now, put the car in gear and drove towards the setting sun, leaving the ghost of his past behind once and for all. As the town faded in his rearview mirror, Ethan realized that the end of his revenge wasn't the end of his story. It was just the beginning of a new chapter. And for the first time in years, he found himself looking forward to what came next. This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comment section. Thanks for your time. If you enjoy this story, please subscribe to this channel. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.
My name is Alex Costa, a 35-year-old with a string of houses in my name in our hometown. This has been achieved through years of hard work, careful investments, and sacrifices along the way. To give some context, I come from a modest family. My parents were both blue-collar workers who labored tirelessly to provide a comfortable life for me and my siblings. They always dreamed of owning their own home, but it was beyond their reach. Their dedication ignited my ambition and fueled my determination to build a better life for myself and my family. During my college years, I met my wife. She shared similar experiences growing up, raised by a single mother who worked multiple jobs to make ends meet. From her upbringing, she learned the significance of financial prudence and resourcefulness. We both wanted to overcome financial struggles and create a stable life for our future children. Together, my wife and I bought and flipped houses over the years, saving every penny and making careful investments. Eventually, we accumulated several properties, each representing years of hard work, countless sacrifices, and a shared dream. Today, I'm a father to two wonderful kids, a son and a daughter. Our properties are not just a source of income. They symbolize our dedication to securing a future for our children. Little did I know that my life would soon take an unexpected twist, thanks to an entitled woman named Susan. Susan has been one of my tenants for a few years. She lives in a comfortable 3-bedroom house that I had carefully saved for and purchased years before marrying my wife. The property is in a prime location in the city and is conveniently close to her daughter's high school. Susan, a single mother, had been abandoned by her husband shortly after their daughter was born. Learning of her situation, I offered her a subsidized rent to make it affordable for her and her daughter. Though I knew I would lose out on potential income, I wanted to help them. Over the years, I've never increased the rent, allowing it to remain the same. Susan was a reliable tenant, always paying on time, and we had developed a casual landlord-tenant relationship, occasionally keeping in touch when she needed assistance around the house. Her daughter, Jenna, is a high school senior preparing for college. 3 months ago, Susan proudly informed me that Jenna had been accepted into a prestigious out-of-state university, a remarkable achievement for any student. However, this university was very expensive, and unfortunately, Jenna's scholarship barely covered 10% of her fees. I understood the financial challenges of higher education and wondered how they would manage. One day, Susan requested to meet with me. Assuming it was about some renovations needed around the house, I agreed without hesitation. We sat down in her living room, where she began by expressing her appreciation for my generosity in keeping the rent affordable. She went on to explain that she wanted Jenna to attend her dream university, but, after crunching the numbers, realized the costs, including tuition, housing, and other expenses, were overwhelming. She had even reached out for financial aid, explored scholarships, and taken up a part-time job in addition to her full-time one, yet it still wasn't enough. I nodded sympathetically, expecting that she might ask to delay paying the rent for a month, which would have been understandable. Instead, Susan presented a request that left me dumbfounded. She asked if I could sell the property she was renting. I looked at her, stunned, as she explained that the money from selling this property could help fund her daughter's college education. "Are you serious?" I responded, a mix of astonishment and disbelief in my voice. "You want me to sell my property to pay for your daughter's college tuition?" Susan's eyes pleaded with me as she insisted it was her only hope to secure her daughter's future. She mentioned she had already had the entire property appraised and was confident that the sale proceeds would cover Jenna's entire college fees. I asked her if she had lost her mind because there was no way I would sell my property just for her daughter to attend a high-end university. I told her that this house meant something to me, and I wasn't going to part with it so easily. Undeterred, Susan suggested I could loan her the money and that Jenna would pay it back after graduation. While I understood the importance of a college education, I wasn't willing to accept her outrageous request. Her persistence made it clear that she was determined to fund her daughter's dreams, even if it meant making an outlandish proposition to a near stranger. I calmly explained to Susan that the property was a significant part of my livelihood and that I couldn't simply part with it. I concluded by telling her, "The burden of your daughter's tuition should not fall on my shoulders." I told Susan that if she couldn't afford to send her daughter to that university, she could ask her family members for help or consider finding a more affordable option. Despite my attempts to make her see reason, Susan continued to press the issue, insisting that I was the only one who could help. She claimed it wouldn't be a big deal for me to sell my property and hand her the money. Realizing this was going nowhere, I left the property after firmly asking Susan never to approach me about this matter again. I requested that she recognize how unreasonable her demand was and urged her to find another way to solve her problem. I thought she might eventually realize her mistake, but over the next few weeks, Susan didn't give up. As her daughter's college journey drew closer, the situation became increasingly unbearable. Susan, despite my clear refusal, kept pleading with me daily to sell my property as soon as possible and even stopped paying her rent in protest. Our once amicable relationship had soured entirely, and the tension between us grew as Susan became more insistent, convinced that my refusal was selfish and jeopardizing her daughter's future. Meanwhile, I was losing income due to her refusal to pay rent in protest. I warned her that I would take this to court since we had an ironclad agreement, but she remained defiant, and it became clear her demands had no end. The turning point came when Susan began involving others in our dispute. She started approaching her friends and neighbors, portraying me as an unsympathetic landlord who refused to help a young girl realize her dreams. She told them that, although I was very wealthy, I refused to loan her the money. Given her status as a single mother struggling to make ends meet, her story garnered sympathy from those she confided in. Susan took it a step further by airing her grievances on social media. She posted on Facebook, blaming me for her daughter's inability to attend college, which quickly circulated in our neighborhood. People began sympathizing with her plight, assuming I was indeed capable of helping but was choosing not to. It was a surreal experience, feeling like an outsider in my own community. With tension in the neighborhood mounting, my wife decided to reach out to Susan, hoping a direct conversation might resolve the conflict. However, Susan wasn't interested in a calm discussion. She launched into a tirade, accusing me of having the means to sell the property, which she saw as the only way to secure her daughter's future. Despite my wife's sincere attempts to reason with her, Susan's conviction remained unshaken. She repeatedly asserted that we had the means to fund her daughter's college education and were being selfish by refusing. Susan's social media post, painting me as an unsympathetic and wealthy landlord who refused to help, had a noticeable impact on our neighbors. Some who had previously been friendly began viewing us with skepticism, believing that I was indeed capable of alleviating her daughter's financial burdens but was choosing not to out of selfishness. Fortunately, others who knew the reality of my situation and the hard work I had invested shared my perspective. They were equally appalled by Susan's audacious demand and reminded me of the importance of protecting the legacy I had built. As the community became more divided, Susan continued to fan the flames, accusing me of lacking empathy and exploiting her by allowing her to live in my property rent-free. Her social media posts became more vocal, sharing exaggerated stories of her daughter's determination and the sacrifices she claimed to have made to prepare for college. The situation escalated from a private disagreement to a public spectacle. The weight of the allegations began affecting my family as well. My children started experiencing bullying at school, with classmates parroting the false claims they had seen on social media about me. Watching the distress this situation caused my family was heartbreaking, and I knew I had to act. I had hoped Susan would eventually stop, but now that my children were suffering, it was time to set the record straight and defend my integrity. I reached out to a lawyer who specialized in property disputes and landlord-tenant conflicts. Together, we drafted a cease and desist letter to end Susan's defamatory actions and protect my standing within the community. My lawyer explained that the letter was the first step in our legal battle, and if Susan didn't back down, we would pursue the matter in court. When Susan received the letter, she was understandably shocked. She attempted to reach out to me by phone, but I chose not to answer her calls. Instead, she sent me a text message, expressing her desire to talk and clear this up before things went too far. She claimed it was all a huge misunderstanding and suggested we could discuss it to resolve the issue. I replied, stating firmly that my intention was to take her to court if she continued her campaign against me. I told Susan to brace herself and enjoy it because she would soon regret ever trying to mess with me. I knew this was going to be an uphill fight. This woman had been relentless in insisting that I pay her daughter's tuition, damaging my family's reputation both in the community and online. My lawyer is preparing our case for trial if she refuses to back down, outlining all the false accusations and the harm she's caused us over the last few months. When some of my relatives heard I was taking her to court, they suggested giving her a chance to settle the matter amicably, citing that she's a single mother trying to do the best for her child. So, Reddit, am I the villain here for refusing to sell my property to pay this entitled mom's daughter's college fees and instead taking her to court? Susan responded to our legal action with a letter filled with threats and more defamatory claims. She accused me of charging high rent, knowing her financial struggles, which she claimed made it impossible for her to save for her daughter's education. I can't believe how low she's willing to go, stooping to outright lies to get her way. Her accusations are entirely baseless, and it's incredibly frustrating to see her play the victim when I had provided her with a subsidized rent all these years. It's clear she's trying to manipulate the situation in her favor, and I'm not about to let that happen. My lawyer, Brian, assured me that we have a strong case since her accusations are groundless, but he also warned me to be prepared for a long, draining legal process. I can't help but think about how quickly this situation spiraled. It was never my intention to end up in a courtroom with a tenant, but sometimes you have to stand your ground to protect what's rightfully yours. Susan might have her reasons, but I can't allow her to pressure me into selling my property. My family's future is at stake, and I'm determined to see this through, no matter how challenging it gets. The legal proceedings have begun, and the anticipation leading up to the court date was excruciating. The courtroom was charged with tension as both parties presented their arguments and evidence. Susan, flanked by her attorney, portrayed herself as a struggling mother determined to secure her daughter's future. Her attorney painted a vivid picture of her financial hardships, emphasizing how my property was supposedly her daughter's last hope for attending the prestigious out-of-state university. Susan's testimony was laced with emotion. Her eyes welled up with tears as she described the sacrifices she had made as a single mother, the long hours she worked, and her relentless pursuit of financial aid and scholarships. She painted herself as a mother who had left no stone unturned in her daughter's journey to success. Throughout the proceedings, Susan's attorney relentlessly tried to paint me as a wealthy, unsympathetic landlord who prioritized profit over a young girl's dreams. They implied that I had been fully aware of Susan's financial struggles yet continued to exploit her with high rent. But the most astonishing twist came when Susan introduced a witness, a family friend, who claimed to have overheard a conversation in which I allegedly promised to sell the property to finance her daughter's college education. I sat in disbelief as this blatant falsehood was presented. My attorney, Brian, vehemently challenged the claim, asserting that no such conversation ever took place. He took a methodical approach, cross-examining the so-called witness to highlight the gaps and inconsistencies in their story. Brian asked the friend to specify the date, time, and location of this alleged conversation, hoping to expose the inconsistencies or gaps in their recollection. The family friend struggled under scrutiny, unable to provide consistent details or any concrete evidence, such as texts or emails, to support their claim. Their testimony became increasingly shaky under cross-examination. To further undermine Susan's case, Brian presented records of texts and emails between Susan and me during the period when the alleged promise was said to have occurred. These messages clearly showed that the topic of selling my property to fund her daughter's education was never discussed. Instead, they revealed that Susan was the one persistently urging me to sell my property. Additionally, a neighbor who lived next to Susan's property testified that she had been paying significantly less rent than others in the area. My lawyer even brought in rent receipts from other tenants in the neighborhood to prove this point. Brian argued that the absence of any written or electronic communication regarding Susan's claims, combined with the neighbor's testimony, cast serious doubt on the family friend's account, making it inadmissible as concrete evidence. We then shifted our focus to Susan's actions on social media. Brian presented a comprehensive record of Susan's posts and messages, where she accused me of being an unsympathetic and heartless landlord who refused to support her daughter's dreams. These posts were filled with emotional appeals and outright falsehoods, clearly designed to gain sympathy and support from the community. We emphasized that these posts were intentionally crafted to create a narrative that painted Susan as a struggling mother doing everything possible for her child's future, when, in reality, she was emotionally blackmailing me to sell my property. Brian then introduced screenshots of social media comments and direct messages from individuals who had engaged with Susan's posts. Some of these individuals were part of the local community and had formed a negative opinion of me based on the false information presented by Susan. These comments ranged from expressions of sympathy for her plight to outright accusations that I was an unfeeling landlord exploiting her situation. In addition to the social media evidence, we presented witness testimonies from my children, who had experienced bullying at their school due to Susan's social media posts. They described how their classmates had echoed the false claims they had read online about their father, leading to name-calling and harassment. My attorney went on to argue that there was a direct connection between Susan's false accusations on social media and the bullying my children had endured. The intentionally misleading narrative she had crafted had not only damaged my reputation but also directly affected my family's well-being. This presentation of evidence effectively showed how Susan's actions on social media led to real-life consequences for my children. As the legal proceedings continue, I am confident that justice will be served. The evidence presented so far has shed light on the truth and exposed the false claims made against me. I believe that the court will see through the manipulation and ensure a fair outcome in this case. The past month has been a grueling experience due to the legal proceedings. It has been like a roller coaster ride, with unexpected twists and turns. My lawyer continued to present evidence and testimonies, which made it increasingly clear that Susan's claims were baseless. Her attempt to manipulate the situation by introducing a family friend who falsely testified about a promise I had never made fell apart under scrutiny. The lack of concrete evidence and inconsistencies in the witnesses' account cast doubt on the validity of their claims. After a thorough examination of all the evidence and testimonies, the judge finally announced the verdict and ruled in my favor. This came as a huge relief to me, and I was grateful that the judge had seen through all the baseless claims. Susan was found guilty of defamation and was ordered to pay damages for the harm she had caused to my reputation, starting with paying the rent for the previous months and additional fines. A restraining order was also issued by the judge, preventing Susan from making any further defamatory statements about me or my family. This ruling successfully validated my actions and my right to protect my property. As the legal battle concluded, I watched Susan sitting beside her lawyer, looking defeated. I turned to look at her daughter, Jenna, and couldn't shake off the thought that her dreams had been compromised by her mother's sense of entitlement. This nightmare was finally coming to an end, with justice being served. It was a lesson for everyone on the importance of defending oneself and not letting someone else's audacious demands shake our core beliefs. I can now move forward with a renewed sense of self-assurance and the knowledge that my house and our livelihood are secure. I would like to thank everyone who has supported me on this journey. The mental pressure and struggles my family and I went through were immense, but ultimately, the truth prevailed. It has been 6 months since my courtroom victory. The restraining order has effectively silenced Susan, and the damages she had to pay for defamation provided some level of consolation for the harm done to my reputation. Susan and her daughter had to move out after I gave them the eviction notice. While their circumstances remained challenging, I knew they were no longer my responsibility. I did feel a twinge of sympathy for her daughter's lost educational opportunities, but the reality was that her mother's audacious request had put their family in a difficult situation. Susan was also forced to take down her defamatory social media posts as part of the court's ruling, and everyone quickly found out the extent of her lies. The last I heard about them was when her daughter, Jenna, reached out to me with an apology out of nowhere. Jenna had always been a great kid, and I had watched her grow up, but when her mother started falsely alleging things about me, I cut off contact with them. I was surprised that she wanted to get in touch with me after her mother publicly lost the case. Her message was filled with genuine remorse for the way her mother had behaved and the consequences that had befallen her family as a result. She expressed gratitude for our patience and understanding during the ordeal, recognizing that her mother's actions had caused harm to both our families. She also shared that they had relocated to a more affordable area and that she had decided to attend a local college to pursue her education. She informed me that she had spoken with her mother after the legal proceedings ended and had asked her to back off, stating that she was determined to secure her own future without making any audacious demands. I felt sympathy for what she had to go through at such an early age because of her entitled mother's false claims. I told her that everyone deserves a second chance, and it was admirable that she was taking control of her own destiny. I wished her the best of luck with her studies and assured her that the past was behind us. Now that Susan and her daughter no longer live on my property, our life has settled into a new normal. The weight of the false accusations and the bullying our children faced earlier has been lifted. We took action by reaching out to our children's school and addressing the bullying they had gone through.